Chapter 3999. And reality had proven that Gong Xiaoying's actions were indeed effective. Yu Yu's health was gradually improving. His heart's function had also increased by more than 5 times. At least, his body was no longer as weak as before. It was just that Gong Xiaoying did not tell anyone. It was fine if others misunderstood him, but Yun Shishir could not. He still had a selfish motive. He wanted to let her know his good intentions clearly. At least for this reason, even if she did not forgive him, at least she did not want to cut off all contact with him. This was already a plea. Gong Xiaoying was such a proud man. He was high-spirited and arrogant all his life. Only in front of Yun Shishir did he lower his voice. Perhaps it was because Yun Shishir and Mu Qingqing looked too much alike. When he saw this daughter, it was as if he could see through her soul and see the woman he once loved deeply. His heart melted into a puddle. He poured all the guilt and love he had for Mu Qingqing into her, hoping to make up for his regrets and mistakes. Whether she appreciated it or not, he could not decide. He only hoped that even if she pitied him, she would not be so ruthless. Don't think that I'm her. Are you trying to brush me off with such words? Yun Shishir said angrily. You can't go back to how he was before, and this is all thanks to you. Gong Xiaoying, what is your heart made of? Is it cold? You caused my mother to suffer for her entire life, and you want to turn my world upside down before you are satisfied, right? Gong Xiaoying shook his head, but he could only shake his head. He could not explain anything else. Can you think of a way to make him go back to how he was before? Yun Shishir bit her lip hard and clenched her fists nervously. She was looking forward to Gong Xiaoying's other methods to wake up the old Yu Yu. She wanted the old Yu Yu to come back. Gong Xiaoying said calmly, he has a split personality. Do you know about this? Yun Shishir said. Now I know. I didn't know about this before. Because he's too good at hiding. Gong Xiaoying's eyes revealed a rare look of admiration. This child has always known how to dote on others. He dotes on you and wants to protect you, so he only reports the good news and not the bad news. Is there no other way? Gong Xiaoying said. What if I say yes? Yun Shishir's originally lifeless eyes seemed to have been dyed with light all of a sudden. Her eyes widened. Really? Or we can go back to the past and have the 2 personalities live in the same body. However, this is very painful. 2 personalities coexisting is very dangerous. Sooner or later, he won't be able to bear the burden. Because his 2 personalities are opposites, they will never be able to merge or accept each other. They are destined to clash. Yun Shishir's heart ached when she heard this. The old Yu Yu had 2 personalities coexisting. In front of her, he was innocent and obedient, kind and pure. But the other side was perhaps unimaginably cold. Did they have to go back to this? She couldn't bear to. She didn't want Yu Yu to suffer like this. Then, didn't you say there was another way? Yun Shishir was full of hope. What is it? Gong Xiaoying raised his eyes. His once handsome face was now filled with vicissitudes. Or, we can awaken the first personality and let that personality kill the second personality with his own hands so that the first personality can regain his dominant position. Chapter 4000. The corners of Gong Xiaoying's lips curved upwards. In fact, the first personality will never be killed. That's because the first personality is the original personality, while the second personality is a derivative personality. Many studies have shown that other than the first personality, all other personalities will be killed except for the first personality. Even if he disappears, he will be temporarily sealed up. The way to awaken the first personality is very simple. However, if you want the first personality to take over, unless the first personality kills the second personality, it's very difficult to do so. Yun Shishir felt a stab of pain in her heart. Regardless of whether it was the first personality or the second personality, they were both her Yu Yu. Whether it was the kind Yu Yu or the cold Yu Yu, they were both her flesh and blood. Regardless of which personality it was, she didn't want to give up easily. The first personality killing the second personality? Why did she have to make Yu Yu go through such a cruel decision? No. Yun Shishir's lips suddenly trembled violently. Is there no other way? Gong Xiaoying shook his head silently. Shishir, I understand your feelings. Just like me, I also hope that Yu Yu will be well. It's just that there's no way to make it perfect. You understand my feelings. When Yun Shishir heard that, she sneered coldly. You understand? If you understand, you won't be so cruel as to kill Yu's first personality. I didn't kill it. Gong Xiaoying's tone was very calm. No matter how good I am, I can't infiltrate the child's consciousness. What I'm saying may sound a little abstract, but to put it simply, other than the second personality, no one can communicate with the first personality. Yun Shishir's face froze as if she was frozen. I don't believe it. Her gaze was empty as she muttered. I don't believe that there's only one cruel way. There must be another way. Shishir. Yun Shishir suddenly stood up. You're not allowed to call me that. You have no right to call me that. Gong Xiaoying was speechless. He didn't dare to say anything else, afraid that he would accidentally say something that would anger her. She was too sensitive. He had to tread carefully. Calm down. Maybe there are other ways. Give me a little more time. I'll definitely think of something. No need. What method can you think of? The only method you can think of is the cruel method. The only method you can think of is to kill the personality cruelly. You are the executioner. In a fit of anger, Yun Shishir spoke without thinking. Because of her words, Gong Xiaoying's heart ached so much that he almost suffocated. However, he did not say a word. He remained silent and let her vent. He understood that her emotions had accumulated to a critical point and needed to explode. He allowed her to vent her emotions. That's all for today. I hope you can respect yourself and stop interfering with my life in the future. Yun Shishir added. No matter what, Yu is my son. No matter what, I will find the old Yu. You don't have to worry about anything else. After saying that, she left without looking back. Gong Xiaoying stood up and wanted to chase after her. However, when he saw how determined she was, he didn't have the courage to do so. He had lost. He admitted defeat. However, he had only himself to blame. Chapter 4001. Gong Xiaoying let out a heavy sigh and fell back onto the sofa. His face was expressionless. The door opened again. Gong Jia walked in and saw him sitting in the dark, looking desolate. He finally spoke. Father. Gong Xiaoying grunted. How is she? She left. I've already asked the chauffeur to send her back. Send her back. Otherwise, I won't be at ease. Then you? You don't have to worry about me. Gong Xiaoying waved his hand weakly. I'll just sit here alone. Gong Jia didn't say anything else. He turned around and left. The door closed again. However, Gong Xiaoying didn't notice that in the corner of the escalator on the second floor, a figure was slowly hiding in the corner. Yu stood in the corner expressionlessly. Earlier on, when he heard what Yun Shishir and Gong Xiaoying said, he actually felt a little upset. Disappointment, grievance, loneliness, unwillingness, guilt. He knew that the once innocent and adorable Yu occupied an unshakable position in Yun Shishir's heart. He also understood that even if he gave everything he had, he might not be able to replace Yu's position in Yun Shishir's heart. However, he still wanted to try. Therefore, he occupied this body and stayed by Yun Shishir's side only to gain recognition. He wanted to replace Yu. However, it seemed that he couldn't do it. No one could ever replace another person. Everyone was independent and no one could replace them. But why couldn't he? Was he not good enough? Was he not as good as Yu? He was already trying hard to change. His mother liked to see him smile. Even though he wasn't used to smiling in front of others, he was trying hard to become sunny and play the role of an innocent and pure person. However, he was originally a second personality, a personality born from darkness. How could he transform into the real sunshine? This was a form of suppression and disguise. He had also thought of giving up. She wanted to give up and let the original Yu return to her body. As for him, he chose to sleep forever and never wake up. But he couldn't do it. Even if he was born from darkness, he still instinctively felt warmth in his heart. Yun Shishir was as warm as the sun. Gradually, he developed a fatal dependence on this kind of warmth. Therefore, he occupied this body and wanted to play the role of Yu and take all of Yun Shishir's love. However, he had also heard it. He had truly heard it. Yun Shishir missed the old Yu so much and hoped that he would return to her side. He found out from Gong Jia that Yun Shishir was meeting with Gong Xiaoying, so he secretly came here. He did not tell anyone because he was worried. Thus, he secretly hid on the second floor and overheard their conversation. However, when he heard Yun Shishir's true thoughts, he couldn't help but feel a little sad. Could it be that he wasn't needed? Yu couldn't help but doubt himself. She seemed to miss the old Yu. But what about him? Didn't she need him? Couldn't he replace him? Then what was the point of his existence? Yu clutched his heart and squatted down with a lonely expression, hugging himself helplessly. He also longed for warmth. He was also Yu. He was also a part of this life. Why was he not needed? Why was he so rejected? Chapter 4002. At the same time, something that Gong Xiaoying said reminded him of something. The first personality will never be killed. Was that really the case? Yu pondered over this sentence and felt a tinge of fear in his heart. The first personality would never be killed, but the second personality would disappear forever. He was the second personality. He could be killed by the first personality, disappear from this world forever. Yu furrowed his brows. There was a look of hesitation and conflict on his exquisite and handsome face. It was as if he had finally made up his mind. The corners of his lips curled into a cold arc. When Gong Jie and Yun Shishir returned to the Mu residence, they didn't see Yu. They couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Xiaoyichen was taking an afternoon nap. Yun Shishir shook him awake and asked him where Yu had gone. Xiaoyichen said, "Isn't Yu at home?" The two of them looked at each other. Yun Shishir finally panicked. Why wasn't Yu at home? If he wasn't at home, where could he have gone? It had been more than a year since that incident. Yu had returned from Ashland Island. She still remembered that when he had just returned, he was extremely cold towards her and Muyaja. Yun Shishir's heart ached for him because he had lost all his memories. That was why he had become so cold. However, she cherished what she had lost even more now that she had regained it. She patiently accompanied him and cared for him. In the end, Yu gradually stopped being estranged from her, and was no longer so cold towards her. He gradually accepted both Muyaja and Xiaoyichen and was willing to accept this family. At first, she was still worried that Yu would leave her secretly one night. However, even though Yu wasn't as innocent and adorable as before, he had gradually opened up to her. He had also started to like sticking to her. Yu usually wouldn't run around. Something must have happened. He had started to dote on her and wouldn't let her worry. How could such a Yu suddenly disappear without a word? Just as Yun Shishir was extremely worried, Yu obediently returned home half an hour later. "Mommy!" Yun Shishir was about to call Muyaja and ask him to hurry home to find Yu. Just as she picked up her cell phone, the door opened. She and Gong Jie turned their heads and stared at Yu as he slowly walked into the house. She was stunned for a moment, then immediately rushed over nervously and hugged him in her arms. "Yu, where have you been?" Yu couldn't help but yearn for her warm embrace. He hugged Yun Shishir's shoulders and stroked her hair gently. "I was bored at home, so I went out for a walk." His tone was extremely affectionate, but he sounded a little dazed as he spoke. He saw Yun Shishir's nervousness, but he also felt a little lost. Was this worry real? Was this kind of warmth real? He was a little dazed. He didn't know if Yun Shishir's worry was for him or for this body. The conversation she had with Gong Xiaoying earlier still rang in his ears. She had said that she was still waiting for Yu to return to her side. "Yu, are you cold?" Yun Shishir's gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. It was snowing outside. Chapter 4003. Yun Shishir's gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. It was snowing outside. She didn't know where he had gone or how far he had walked. Just thinking about it made her heart ache. Yun Shishir touched his little hand. It was icy cold. Her heart ached as she held it and rubbed it for him. "Mommy!" Yu's lips curled into a smile as he turned to look at her. Yun Shishir had never seen Yu smile so brightly and warmly. At least, she had never seen him smile so brightly since he had returned from Ashland Island. She caressed his cheek gently. What's the matter?" Yu smiled and said, "Mommy, if I had a wish list, would you fulfill all my wishes?" "Wish list?" Yun Shishir was a little surprised. "You have a wish list?" "Yeah." Yu nodded and said, "Yes, I have a lot of wishes. Mommy, are you willing to fulfill them?" "If Mommy can fulfill them, Mommy will definitely fulfill them. Yu Yu's face broke into a rare smile. He pursed his lips and smiled shyly. However, he immediately regained his usual calm expression. Then you can't go back on your words. Yeah, when have I ever gone back on my words? Yun Shirshir said as she kissed his rosy cheeks. At night, Xiaoyichen walked into the room and saw Yu Yu sitting on the bed. He was holding a notebook and scribbling with a fountain pen. Yu Yu was used to using a fountain pen. The most surprising thing was that he had never practiced writing with a fountain pen before. However, his handwriting with a fountain pen was especially delicate and beautiful. Xiaoyichen didn't know what he was scribbling on. He looked over curiously. However, Yu Yu sensitively closed the notebook and glanced at him warily. What are you doing? Looking, what are you drawing? I'm drawing you. Xiaoyichen was pleasantly surprised. Really? As he spoke, he reached out to snatch the notebook from Yu Yu's hand. However, Yu Yu immediately dodged him. He picked up the notebook and slapped it hard on his forehead. Xiaoyichen covered his forehead in pain and complained pitifully. Why did you hit me? How pretentious. Yu Yu scoffed. Aren't you supposed to be able to take pain? Why are you groaning in pain? Xiaoyichen was speechless. He crossed his arms angrily and asked angrily, You secretly drew me. Can't I see how you drew it? I didn't ask you to look, so don't look. As Yu Yu spoke, she turned around and flipped open her notepad. She held a fountain pen and started scribbling. Seeing that Xiaoyichen really didn't want to show it to him, Xiaoyichen didn't want to be snubbed. He lay down on the bed and played games on his phone. Yu Yu glanced sideways and looked deeply at Xiaoyichen. Then she quietly wrote on her notepad. I want to celebrate my birthday with Xiaoyichen. Here. Yu Yu handed an exquisite notebook to Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. What's this? Yu Yu's wish list. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but laugh. She originally thought that he was just joking about his wish list. She didn't expect him to really come up with a wish list. She flipped to the first page. On the title page, Yu Yu had drawn a cartoon version of his family photo. His drawing skills were exquisite, and the cartoon version was very casual. Chapter 4004. On the first item of the wish list, Yu Yu wrote, I want mommy to give me a morning kiss every morning and a good night kiss every night before I go to bed. Yun Shirshir smiled, gently hugged the back of his neck, and gave him a kiss. Moi. Good morning, Yu Yu. Yu Yu pursed his lips and blushed. He stood on his tiptoes and kissed her gently on the cheek. Good morning, mommy. Yun Shirshir immediately said. Good boy. Mommy will give you a morning kiss and a good night kiss every day until you get married. Okay. What's the second item? Yun Shirshir looked down the list again. The second item was, say, I love you to Yu Yu. Are all your wishes so simple? Yun Shirshir muttered in her heart. This little guy was so easily contented. She hugged him and said, Yu Yu, mommy loves you. Mommy will always love you. When Yu Yu heard this, the corners of his mouth finally broke into a warm smile. His heart was instantly filled with warmth. He snuggled up to Yun Shirshir and rested his head on her knee. He just stayed by her side quietly. He wanted time to stop here and never leave again. He wanted to hug her like this and never let go of her. This warm embrace was the most difficult thing for him to let go of. However, he knew. He was very clear about it. Time would not stop here, and it would not stop at this moment. Therefore, he cherished every minute and every second in front of him. His docility and dependence made Yun Shirshir feel tender affection for him. She hugged his back and slowly scanned through the wish list. 4. I want to build a snowman with mommy. 5. I want to celebrate Xiaoyichen's birthday with him. 6. I want to go to the amusement park with mommy and daddy. Gradually, Yun Shirshir's nose began to ache for some reason. The list of wishes in Yu Yu's notebook was extremely simple, but almost every wish had something to do with her. At the same time, she felt an inexplicable sense of unease in her heart. This wish list actually made her feel a little heavy-hearted. It was as if Yu Yu would leave her if she fulfilled all the wishes on the list. She didn't know why she had such a thought. However, in the face of such an abnormal Yu Yu, she became very sensitive. In the past, Yu Yu would never take the initiative to stick to her. It was a feeling of having nothing to fear. It was as if a person's life was so long that there would always be many opportunities to accomplish many things. However, this wish list made Yoon Shurshur feel like Yu was saying goodbye to her. It was as though he didn't have much time left with her. Therefore, he wanted to use the limited time he had to fulfill all his unfulfilled wishes and leave with no regrets. She didn't know why she had such a feeling. However, when she saw at the end of the wish list, "Take a family photo," her heart skipped a beat. She felt an inexplicable heartache. "You, why do you have this wish list?" Yoon Shurshur asked tentatively. "There are so many wishes. There's still a lot of time in the future. You don't have to rush to fulfill them now, right?" Actually, they couldn't be considered wishes, because this was something that she could easily do. For example, go to the amusement park, celebrate his birthday, or make a cake for him. For example, take a family photo. Chapter 4005. Yu buried his little face in her embrace as he mumbled this under his breath. "I want it. I want it." Yu raised his head. His domineering tone was no different from Muyaja's. Yoon Shurshur was a little helpless, but she let him do as he pleased. "Okay then, when your daddy rests tomorrow we'll take a family photo, okay?" "Okay." At night, when Muyaja returned home, Yoon Shurshur asked him to take 3 days off. Muyaja was a little surprised. "What's the matter?" "Here." Yoon Shurshur smiled and handed him a notebook. "This is Yu's wish list. Take a look." Muyaja took the notebook and glanced at it, a little surprised. "Wish list? Why did he make this list?" "I don't know. This guy has been a little strange since he came back yesterday, but no matter how I asked he wouldn't tell me. He only said these wishes and wants me to fulfill them." Muyaja was a little stunned. He also felt that Yu was a little strange, but looking at these wishes, he could actually fulfill them easily. He didn't say anything and just nodded. "I'll take tomorrow off." "You're asking for 3 days?" Yu said that he wants to go to the amusement park and celebrate Xiaoichen's birthday. "You can't be absent." Muyaja smiled and said indulgently, "Okay, I know. What else could be more important than his wife and son?" Hence, the next day Muyaja called Lu Jinyu and said that he wanted to take 3 days off. Although Muyaja was the chairman and CEO of Xingyu Financial Group in the company, even if he was the one who set the rules, he himself was very strict with the rules. Just like the other employees, he would clock in and out and would never be absent from work, let alone be late and leave early. Originally, Muyaja had 7 days of annual leave to make up for. Lu Jinyu said that he got it, and for these few days he would be in charge of everything. Yoon Shurshur had already contacted the photographer the night before, and she had also informed Gong Jia and Hua Jin. The photographer arrived very early and did makeup for Yoon Shurshur and Lisa. Hua Jin was the last to arrive. When he heard about this, he specially took leave from the production team to rush over. Now everyone was here. Yu was very satisfied. Because of his wish, so many people had cooperated with him. This made him feel incomparably warm. Yoon Shurshur had only put on light makeup, while Lisa had only tied up her hair. She looked refreshed and did not put on any extra makeup. The background was sitting in the garden. The camera and light board were set up, and there was a bench in front of the flower bed. The men were standing and the women were sitting. Naturally, Wuxia was about to enter the scene as well. Yoon Shurshur meticulously dressed her up. She put on a red blouse and a furry hat for her. However, the little princess was still drinking yogurt and was about to start filming when Gong Jia carried her away. Now he was too big of a movement, and the yogurt spilled on the ground. When the little princess saw this, her heart ached. As a little foodie, when she saw the yogurt spilled, she immediately lost her temper. She was so angry that she kicked Gong Jia, leaving footprints all over him. Gong Jia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't do it on purpose. He immediately bent down to kiss her. Wah! Yuyao's face was full of disdain. She was so angry that she slapped his face. Chapter 4006. Gong Jia didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't do it on purpose and immediately bent down to kiss her. Yuya was so angry that she slapped his face. She slapped Gong Jia's face with her little paws. The group of people laughed and rushed forward to coax the little princess in a hurry. They fought to take the little princess into their arms. Even though Gong Jia was covered in black shoe prints from Yuyao's kicks, He could not bear to give the little princess to anyone else. This was especially so when Hua Jin came to pick her up. He rolled his eyes at him fiercely. Yu Yu stood at the side and watched quietly. In the past, he was not used to such a noisy scene. He liked quiet, but after returning to the Mu family, not only did he get used to it, but he also integrated into such an environment. She felt that the family was only warm enough when they were quarreling. However, all of this didn't belong to him. Yu Yu said softly in his heart, "Give me a few more days. Give me a few more days and I'll return everything that belongs to you." Yun Shishir took Yue Yao from Gong Jie's arms. After the little princess was coaxed, she stopped crying and stopped making a fuss. She quietly lay on Yun Shishir's shoulder. Her dark eyes were still filled with tears, and her eyelashes were wet. It made her look pitiful. Yu Yu walked over and stood beside Yun Shishir. He looked up at Yue Yao and suddenly smiled and opened his arms. "Brother hug." Yue Yao blinked. At first, she was reluctant and shrunk her neck. Yu Yu smiled and reached out his fingers to gently pinch her cheeks and ruffle her hair. It turned out that there was a telepathic connection between siblings. Yue Yao and Yu Yu looked at each other for a long time. Suddenly, she stretched out her hands and opened her pink lips. "Big brother, carry me." When Yun Shishir heard this, she realized that Yu Yu was standing behind her and had been staring at Yue Yao for a long time. She squatted down and Yu Yu walked up to Yue Yao and hugged her. Soon Gong Jie also changed his clothes and went downstairs. Yun Shishir and Muyaja sat down. Yu Yu hugged Yue Yao and sat next to Yun Shishir. Basically, family photos were taken every year. But last year, because Muyaja was too busy with work and Yun Shishir took on a drama in the middle of the year, the two of them basically missed each other's free time, so they didn't have much free time. This time it was just the right time to make up for it. The photos were taken on the spot and could be obtained immediately. One of them was enlarged, and the other was of normal size. They were placed in Yu Yu's wish list. The so-called wish list was really simple and pure. For example, Yu Yu wanted to celebrate Xiaoichen's birthday with him. At the birthday party, he wanted to eat a cake personally made by Yun Shishir. Yun Shishir was worried about this. Although she would occasionally cook and bake, she would only stick to small cakes. She still felt a little guilty about making a proper birthday cake. Hence, the night before the birthday party, at 1 o'clock in the morning, she was still in the kitchen making the cake base. She had failed a few times before. It was either too hard or not fully cooked. It was because the proportions were not right. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the fresh cake base was finally out of the oven. Yun Shishir also made fresh cream, strawberries, and jam. Chapter 4007. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the fresh cake was finally ready. Yun Shishir whipped fresh cream, strawberries, and jam. In the middle of the night, Yu Yu woke up and vaguely heard movement from the kitchen. He walked to the kitchen door in confusion, only to see Yun Shishir using the back of a knife to smooth out the cream on the cake. He couldn't help but be mesmerized. Yun Shishir was also immersed in making the cake, so she didn't notice the person standing at the door. Yu Yu couldn't bear to disturb her, so he just watched as she smoothed out the cream, whipped the flowers, and embedded the slices of strawberries into the cake. He was about to go back to his room when he heard a surprised voice behind him. "Yu Yu." He turned around in surprise, only to see Yun Shishir turn around and look in his direction. Knowing that she had been discovered, she stuck out her tongue in annoyance. "It's so late, aren't you going to sleep?" Yu Yu said. "I'm going to pee." "Have you peed?" Yu Yu said. "I forgot." Yun Shishir was speechless. She couldn't help but laugh. Pinching his face, she said, "Hurry up and go pee. I want mommy to kiss me. Kiss me after you pee. Kiss me before I pee." Little Munchkin insisted and moved his face closer. She had no choice but to give him a peck on his rosy cheeks. Little Munchkin hurriedly moved the other side of his face closer. Full of anticipation, he hummed, "Here. Okay, it has to be symmetrical, right?" Yun Shishir kissed him on the other cheek. Yu Yu also kissed her and turned to walk to the bathroom. Yun Shishir tilted her head and watched his back. She didn't know why, but Yu Yu had been very intimate with her these few days. In the past, if she missed a goodnight kiss, he wouldn't deliberately go to her room to ask for one. Recently, Yu Yu was indeed a little abnormal. However, this means that he has become more cheerful. Yun Shishir comforted herself. She carefully placed the cake into the freezer and went back to her room to rest. The next day there weren't many people at the birthday party. Gong Jie did not come, and Hua Jin was filming on set. It was a simple birthday party, and there were only 6 of them. But this was Yu Yu's request. Since it was just a birthday party, he didn't want to make it a big deal. He wanted to make up for it because he hadn't had a birthday party with Xiaoyi Chen yet. They were twins born on the same day, but they didn't have the chance to celebrate their birthdays together, so they wanted to make up for it. When Yun Shishir pushed out the birthday cake that she had stayed up all night to make, Xiaoyi Chen was pleasantly surprised. Yun Shishir explained, "You said that he wanted to eat the birthday cake I made. But, come to think of it, this is the most successful cake I've ever made. If you didn't want to eat it, I probably wouldn't have tried to make it myself." Xiaoyi Chen said with envy and jealousy, "It's all thanks to you. Otherwise, I don't know when I'll be able to taste Mommy's birthday cake." Mu Yaja also said seriously, "In the family, only Yu and Yao have this privilege." The tone of their conversation is really sour. Yu muttered, "They're jealous." Chapter 4008. Alright. Let's cut the cake. Yun Shishir passed the knife to Yu and let Xiaoyi Chen hold Yu's hand. "Be careful, okay?" she reminded him. Yu held the knife while Xiaoyi Chen held his hand. They evenly divided the cake into 2 halves and then into 6 equal pieces. Yu took the first bite. The sweet and creamy taste complemented the refreshing taste of the strawberries. It tasted delicious and was comparable to the cake made by a cake shop. Although it did not have the skills of a top-notch cake maker, the fact that it was personally made by Yun Shishir gave the birthday cake a special meaning. At night, Yu held onto his wish list and removed one of the items. Seeing that all his wishes were gradually being fulfilled and that only the amusement park item was left, he felt a sense of loss. In his dream, he woke up and realized that he was lying on the sea. Wave after wave hit his body, but he did not feel any pain. Yu stood up and saw that there was a black cage not far from the sea. A child in a white shirt was quietly curled up in the corner of the cage. He did not move at all. From afar he looked like he was dead. He slowly stood up and walked toward the cage. When he stopped beside the cage, he raised his head and looked at the child curled up in the cage. He could not help but reach out to touch him. However, just as his fingertips were about to touch the child's exposed and empty arm, he retracted his hand. Yu pursed his lips and grabbed the edge of the cage expressionlessly. He exerted a little force and the cage instantly collapsed into ruins. This cage was the cage that imprisoned his first personality in his subconscious space. He was the only one who had the ability to open the cage. Now he had broken the cage. In the ruins, the child in the white shirt gradually opened his eyes. He looked like he had been in a deep sleep for a long time. The blood in his body was frozen and he did not stand up for a long time. He was cold. He had been asleep for too long. Because his second personality had been suppressed, he had been imprisoned for a long time. After sleeping for so long, her consciousness would gradually weaken. Even though she would never disappear, she would never be able to replace her second personality. Yu looked at the child in the cage and said calmly, "Are you awake?" The child in the cage opened his eyes. When he saw Yu standing in front of him, he narrowed his eyes in shock. "It's you. It's me." Yu coldly raised his eyes to meet his father's slightly dazed eyes. I tried my best. But," he took a deep breath. "In the end I can't replace you." In the endless black sea, the two Yu stared at each other. In this quiet space of consciousness they met again. It was like a confrontation between an angel and a demon king. "Why are you here?" Yu, who was wearing a white shirt, sat up in the cage. His gaze toward him was inexplicably wary. "What do you want?" Yu curled his lips coldly and suddenly leaned over. He placed his arms on the side of his shoulders and looked down at him, examining him without restraint. The white shirt Yu was a little surprised by his actions. He froze and looked at him blankly. "What do you want?" Chapter 4009. He had been in a deep sleep for too long. Being trapped in such a space of consciousness and losing his own consciousness was no different from being dead. But now, his second personality had awakened. Yu stared at his face. "Don't you think it's unfair? Why is it that you are the first personality, and I am the second personality that was born? You're the one who gave birth to me. Now I'm the one who's not needed. Why? Yu Yu's handsome brows gradually formed a layer of hostility, like a dark cloud hanging over his head. It's not fair. Yu Yu, who was dressed in a white shirt, smiled lightly and said nonchalantly, "There's no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. In the past, I've always thought that I'm the real first personality. So, I used all means and means to replace you. If the two personalities were labeled by color, one was white and the other was black. That time Alice hypnotized Yu Yu. The second personality took over, and the black version of him awakened from his ideology. He had always thought that he was the real first personality and that he had the absolute control. So, he wanted to destroy the other personality and return to the dominant position. But that time he realized he couldn't destroy the other Yu Yu. He didn't know why, and he didn't know that the personality that couldn't be destroyed was the first personality. He still thought that he was the first personality and that this body originally belonged to him. He should take it back. Until he heard the conversation between Gong Xiaoying and Yun Shishir, he realized that the first personality could never be destroyed. It would only be sealed. Then he confirmed that this body didn't belong to him. The Mu family wasn't his home either. Yun Shishir, Mu Yaje Weyao Huajin, these people who had given him warmth didn't belong to him. They belonged to Yu Yu. The reason why he received this warmth was because they treated him as Yu Yu as a substitute. He was an unwanted substitute. Then he chose to give up. Otherwise, Mommy would be very sad. She wanted the old Yu Yu to come back to her, so he might as well fulfill her wish. He was willing to give up everything just to let the real Yu Yu return to Yun Shishir's side. He didn't deserve happiness. That was because he was born from darkness to begin with. Even if his heart was closer to sunlight, the child of darkness was not qualified to receive sunlight. Yu Yu smiled and abruptly clasped his brother's shoulder, swapping their positions. At that time, Yu Yu had already been swapped. What are you doing? Yu Yu, who was wearing a black shirt, slowly closed his eyes. He gripped his brother's wrist tightly and let his hand to the handle. Then, he clasped his brother's hand and strangled his own throat. Yu Yu, who was in a white shirt, looked shocked. Don't you want to go back to Mommy? Yu Yu smiled coldly and tightened his grip on his wrist. Kill me, then you can go back to her. Yu Yu, who was in a white shirt, was stunned. The two of them were in a stalemate, maintaining this position. I'm only giving you one chance now. Chapter 40:10. Before I regret it, Yu Yu whispered into his ear. His low voice was even more depressing than the dark sea. Kill me. Why? Don't you want to kill me? He found it strange. If it were him, he would not hesitate to completely wipe out the second personality so that it would no longer threaten his position. Why was he hesitating? He even asked him why. Ha! Yu Yu's lips curved into a smile. His calm expression, coupled with his white shirt, was as bright and dazzling as the morning sun. Do you know? If I wanted to kill you, I would have had the ability to do so back then. But I had no choice because I am different from you. I am the first personality. I will not die, but you will. You are another me, and I am another you. This life is made up of us equally. But I have been occupying this body for so many years. Yu Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air as he held his aching forehead. I'm sorry. All these years I've taken Mommy's love for granted. I've taken all their love for granted, leaving you with nothing but hatred and killing. When he was young, those dark memories eventually formed the second personality. At that time, the personality had just taken shape, and Yu Yu wanted to suppress him. He did not know that he had dual personality. But in his subconscious, he could see the other personality clearly. Sometimes it was in his dreams. Sometimes it was in real life. He was worried that the second personality would gradually take over him, and even hurt his family. He had never thought that the second personality was also a part of life, and that it also craved warmth. He had always defined this personality as evil and had been suppressing it. No matter how he resisted, Yu Yu would not give him a chance to take over his body. Hence, all the happiness in the past 8 years had nothing to do with him. He had taken over all the good things and left the darkness and pain to him. The second personality, Yu Yu, was born in pain and oppression. But from the beginning to the end, he lived in a world of oppression. He also wanted to experience what light was, what happiness was. Hence, when Alice hypnotized Yu, the first personality was hypnotized and the second personality finally broke through the cage and sealed the first personality. But at that time Yu did not resist. Instead he chose to sleep. He wanted the second personality to be free, even if he could not return to Yunshirsher. Yu's pupils constricted. The dark fog in his eyes became more intense. I also want you to experience what it is like to be family. So I am willing to sleep. I just passed the warmth that belongs to you. Yu, who was wearing a white shirt, suddenly hugged him tightly as he furrowed his brows in guilt. Chapter 40:11. Yu said in a low voice, "We can coexist." Coexist? Yu scoffed as if he had heard the funniest joke. We've coexisted for so many years, but we can't get along well at all. Instead of coexisting unfairly, it's better to destroy each other. I'm willing to share my warmth with you. Yu said seriously. I'm willing to share the love of mommy, daddy, brother, uncle, and all the family members. I don't want to. Yu was extremely stubborn. It's either I have it all to myself or I can't have it. As he spoke, he held Yu's hand and pulled it to his neck again. Kill me. Give me freedom. As he said that, he curled his lips. I'm not needed at all. As soon as he said that, he couldn't hold back his tears anymore and they fell from the corners of his eyes. She wants you, not me. Yunshirsher hoped that the original Yu would return to her side. Since she hoped so fervently, he might as well fulfill her wish and return the original kind, cute, innocent Yu to her side. And he had always been used as a replacement. He was needed because of his existence. That was why Yu was still alive. Yunshirsher had always been waiting for Yu to return to her side, but not for him. It wasn't that he didn't try. He tried hard to be like Yu, trying hard to force a smile, trying hard to bring them warmth. However, he couldn't do it. After all, they were two different personalities. He couldn't do it and he couldn't replace him. Hence, he was willing to give up this position. Yu grabbed his wrist tightly and said in a low voice, "Mommy needs you. Go back to her side, okay?" His tone was inexplicably gentler. When he looked at Yu, his gaze was no longer as hateful as when he used to look at Yu. Yu had grown a lot in the past year. Yunshirsher made him understand that in addition to hatred and darkness, there was also light and happiness in life. Life was very cruel. He recognized this cruelty, hated it, and viewed it with enmity. But Yu was the only one who still loved life bravely after deeply understanding the cruelty of life. He was the real hero. He was the only one who had the right to take control of life. I'm not Yu, I'm Gong Fan. Gong Fan smiled. The real Yu is you. Kill me. He held his hand tightly, giving him strength. His dark and turbid eyes instantly became clear. Kill me, and I'll give you back your freedom. A strong gust. His snow-white shirt was slightly wrinkled from the wind. Yu stared blankly at the child lying beneath him, calmly facing destruction. He gradually lost control of his hands, as if they were being controlled by his consciousness. His hands were strangling his neck and accumulating strength. Gradually, Gong Fan felt that the pressure on his throat was getting more and more suffocating. His face turned red, and then the color gradually faded. He frowned and said hoarsely, I don't regret it, he murmured and closed his eyes. At that moment, Yunshirsher's gentle smile and the scenes of them spending time together flashed past his eyes like a merry-go-round. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave. It was just that this reluctance was accompanied by a fatal suffocation, and that illusory consciousness gradually dissipated. Chapter 40:12. Ah! Xiaoqian was drenched in cold sweat as he sat up from the bed in shock. He had a dream. In his dream he saw two Yu. One was wearing a white shirt and the other was wearing a black shirt. The Yu in the black shirt was lying flat on the surface of the sea. He was holding onto the other Yu's wrist and forcing him to kill him. Yu. He turned around and looked at the other side of the bed. He didn't know when, but there was an empty space on the other side of the bed. Yu. Xiaoqian immediately got out of bed. He shuffled his slippers in a panic and opened the door. However, he didn't see Yu. He felt inexplicably uneasy, and it wasn't just because of the dream. The telepathy between the twins made him realize that Yu Yu was in danger. Yu Yu. Xiaoqian walked to the balcony. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, he saw a lonely figure sitting on a swing by the flower bed in the back garden. Yu Yu sat on the swing with his head lowered. The morning sun shone on his body, giving him a golden glow. Xiaoqian heaved a sigh of relief. He opened the door and walked into the back garden. When he got close to Yu Yu, he slowly reached out and gently placed his hand on Yu Yu's shoulder. Yu Yu. Yu Yu lowered his head. He didn't respond. Xiaoqian couldn't help but feel a little worried. You slept so late last night. Why are you up so early? Xiaoqian didn't mention his dream. He thought that Yu Yu was too sensitive. It was just a nightmare. How could he make so many connections? Yu Yu finally raised his head and opened his eyes. He looked at Yu Yu with his clear eyes. His gaze was as clear as spring water, without a trace of impurity. He couldn't help but be stunned. His pupils contracted violently. Brother. Yu Yu took a deep breath of fresh air and said calmly, I'm back. Yu Yu. Xiaoqian was stunned. Although the Yu Yu in front of him still had the same facial features, his aura was completely different. Yu Yu. Xiaoqian was so surprised that he cried tears of joy. You're finally back. He was so emotional that he pounced on him and hugged him tightly. I thought you would never come back. Yu Yu, who was hugged by his older brother, was stunned for a long time before a helpless expression appeared on his face. This guy Yu Yu. However, it gave him a taste of warmth that he hadn't felt for a long time. Yu has hugged him. Yu. Drip. His tears. Tour. Yu couldn't help but laugh. Yu was so emotional that he started to cry. Was he that emotional to see Yu again? Yu ruffled Yu's hair. Yu did not realize that this action made Yu look like an older brother. Xiaoqian hugged Yu tightly and said, Since you're back, don't leave again. Yu laughed. Do you wish that I didn't come back? No. I don't think so. I think that's what you're thinking. Xiaoqian's face turned red. No. Yu knew that Yu was joking, but he didn't want him to make such a joke. Yu rebuked him. He patted his head and snorted. Did you take good care of mommy and sister when I wasn't around? Chapter 40:13. Yu rebuked him. She patted his head and snorted. Did you take good care of mommy and little sister when I wasn't around? Of course. Whether you were around or not, I would take good care of mommy and Yueyao. Xiaoqian suddenly thought of something and his expression froze. He hesitated for a moment and asked tentatively, Yu, now that you're back, you won't leave us again, right? Yu shook her head calmly. I won't. Really? For some reason, Xiaoqian didn't feel happy when he heard this reply. He looked around and hesitated. He wanted to say something, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Yu laughed and said, What do you want to ask? Just ask. You don't have to be so secretive. You're back. Then what about him? Xiaoqian looked a little conflicted. Although he only used the word him, Yu knew who Xiaoqian was referring to. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Do you want him to come back? If he comes back, are you going to leave us again? Yu didn't answer. Instead, there was a dead silence. It was like a silent choice question. Yu sat on the swing. She tapped her toes on the ground and swung gently. Xiaoqian stood quietly at the side with a complicated expression. He didn't understand why he felt so lonely when Yu wasn't around anymore. It was as if his life had suddenly lost something, and his heart had become empty. Yu said calmly, Do you know about dissociative identity disorder? Yes, I know. Mommy mentioned it to me before. You've always had two personalities, right? One is you and the other is Gong Fan. I have two personalities. For a long time I was in a deep sleep. I thought that I would be in a deep sleep forever, but he woke me up. Yu's voice was as soft as a breeze. He said that whether it's mommy, daddy, Yueyao, or you, the one they need is me, not him. He wasn't needed, so he decided to leave. Leave. Xiaoqian didn't understand the meaning of the word leave. Leave for a short while? Or leave permanently? He would never come back. Once he left, he won't come back. Then, Xiaoqian felt especially bad. He looked at Yu and asked, Yu, Yu asked, "Do you want him to stay? I hope both of you will stay." "What if only one can stay?" Little Chen suddenly stopped talking. He lowered his head in desolation and sighed. "I don't have the right to decide this. It was too cruel." No matter which personality Yu was, he was still his younger brother. One gave him warmth. The other made his heart ache. Actually, he didn't hate the other Yu. Although he gave off a very cold feeling, when one peeled off his cold exterior, his heart was very gentle. If only one could stay, such a multiple-choice question was too cruel. However, as his uncle had said, if the two personalities couldn't merge into one, it would be the cruelest thing for Yu. If only one could stay, Chen didn't want to make the cruel choice. Chapter 40:14. Yu did not answer him directly. Instead, he lowered his head and seemed to be thinking about something. Chen immediately said, "Don't misunderstand me. I just can't bear for him to leave. I don't mean anything else." "Okay." Yu nodded silently and said honestly, "I don't want him to leave either." When Chen heard this, his heart ached. He walked to the swing at the side and slowly sat down. Holding the swing, he fell into a daze. After a long silence, Chen asked hesitantly, "What is that world like? What was the world that little Gong Fan was in like?" After all, he was just an ordinary child. It was difficult for him to understand what the world of dual personality disorder was like. He felt very curious. "When I was young, I felt that I wasn't the only one in this body." Yu was rare and precious. He had opened the door to Chen's heart. It was also the most important door. In the past, he had never opened it to Chen. Not to mention Chen, he had never opened it to anyone. This was because he felt that he was an anomaly. He was an abnormal child. He did not want anyone to know that he was abnormal, especially Chen. Chen was too dazzling. From the day he was born, Chen was destined to be better than him. At least, his healthy body made him envious. He did not have to stay in a place filled with disinfectant. He did not have to watch other people's children run and jump normally and play happily. He should be very happy, right? Chen had the most sunny smile. When he smiled, his dimples were extremely cute. Most importantly, Chen was very real. He was so real that he was transparent. At least when he smiled, he was really smiling because he was happy and not because he was forcing it. At the most innocent age of children, Yu already understood when to laugh and when to cry. Sometimes, even when he was in a bad mood, he had to force a smile. Especially when he watched Yuna and Liqin bully him. He felt so wronged, but in order not to let his mother worry, he forced a smile and said that it did not hurt, that he was not afraid, and that it was fine. He did not know when it started, but another Yu lived in his body. Yu had always thought that this Yu was an invader. Hence he had been suppressing him. He had never been to his world because he had never known that Yu had another world. The feeling of having two personalities living in the same body was very strange. Our memories are interconnected. When he was in this body, I didn't know anything. And when I was in this body to be Yu, he didn't know anything. So, Yu uses lips suddenly too. Therefore, I only found out later that he threw Yuna and Liqin into the sea. I don't know everything. I just have a vague feeling that it must have something to do with him. Chen was stunned. He doesn't know what's wrong and what's right. He only knows that if he doesn't like something, he will kill it. If he likes something, he will protect it with all his heart. Yu's lips curved slightly and he suddenly smiled. But there's one thing that's the same between us. He also loves mommy deeply. Chapter 40:15. When I was 6 years old, I had my first interaction with him. Interaction? Yu nodded. It's not the kind of face-to-face interaction that you think it is. It's a very vague type of mental communication. What was it like? When I was asleep, I would dream of him and see the world that he was in. Actually, the world that he was in was the same as mine. He lived in the same house and had the exact same furnishings as my house. However, I don't know why, but it was always dark outside the window and the clouds were dense. I never saw the sun in his world. Yu paused for a moment and suddenly became serious. From then on, I started to suspect that I had a second personality. I read some relevant information. Chen furrowed his brows. I noticed that you were very different. In front of mommy, you were always innocent and cute. However, in front of me, Daddy and Li Hanlin, you were completely different. Was that also you? Yu closed his eyes and answered honestly, that wasn't me. Xiao Chen suddenly muttered. Then you were always cold in front of me. That wasn't you too? Sometimes it was me. Were you the one who said that to me? Sometimes it was me. Sometimes it wasn't. That means… Xiao Chen clutched his chest and suddenly felt a pang in his heart. Regardless of whether it was Yu's first personality or Yu's second personality, in any case. Did they all despise him? His heart ached. Yu laughed and patted his head. Because when I met you, I couldn't control him anymore. In fact, I felt that he was a very talented personality. Why do you say that? In the business world, he was definitely a genius. Back then, those toy designs were indeed drawn by me. It was just purely out of interest. However, one time he ran out and looked at my designs. Then, he handed them over to a company. Even I didn't know about this. I think he would have come out a long time ago, but I can't interfere with his memory, so I don't know his memories when he was in this body, so I thought he didn't come out. Little Li Chen was stunned to hear that. In other words, he doesn't know what you did and what happened when you were in this body, right? Yes. Then you don't know what happened to him as this body. I don't know. However, maybe it's because of the main personality. If it's something that's particularly emotional, I'll know a little bit. Xiao Chen furrowed his brows and reorganized his thoughts. I understand. He was the one who created the glory of Luji Holdings and came up with the Heavenly Eye plan, right? Yes. Yu nodded. Sometimes he and I would take turns and we would swap places very quickly. Perhaps in the blink of an eye we would have swapped places. Therefore, my memories are always different. What kind of difference? Yu recalled and said, I remember one time when I went to school to study. I clearly remember that I had just left the house in the morning. But when I opened my eyes, Mommy was already standing in front of me. When I looked at the sky, it was already evening. Chapter 40:16. Yu turned around and said seriously. In other words, he appeared after I left the house in the morning. When I returned to this body, it was already evening after school. The memory in between is no longer there. And my memory is still stuck in the morning. In the blink of an eye, it was already evening. As for what happened in between, I have no idea at all. Then I felt very tired and exhausted. I wanted to sleep. Sometimes, when the personalities switched, my heart would be overloaded. I would feel very uncomfortable. Xiao Chen suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Just imagining this scene was enough to make him feel terrified. Losing one's memory was the scariest thing. One of the reasons why humans were stronger than other animals was because of their memory. Whether it was studying or working, memory was an indispensable part. For example, as loyal as a dog, even if its owner mistreated it, it would mostly forget this memory. However, humans would not. They would always remember it. It would be engraved in their bones. Once they lost their memory, they would not be able to do anything. Moreover, it would be especially painful. When the personalities switched and the memories were not connected, life would become fragmented and especially painful. It was no wonder that Alice said that Yu's body could not bear the burden of two personalities. This was because the alternation of two personalities was an extremely painful thing in itself. Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air and said faintly, when I found out that this memory partition was caused by the alternation of his and my personalities, I could no longer suppress that situation. In fact, if I could have gotten treatment at that time, perhaps it would not have been so serious. Perhaps it was because I kept suppressing him, so… He held his forehead with a headache. He seemed to be very rebellious. The more I tried to control him, the more rebellious and unreasonable he became. He wanted to control me instead. He even thought that he was the first personality. Xiao Chen said, in fact, I used to think that you were very scary. Because you were like a little angel in front of Mommy, but in front of me, you were so cold, unfamiliar, and sharp-tongued. However, if I think about it carefully, you were not you at that time. You were just another Yu who ran out. However, he did not hurt anyone. Be it Li Qin or Yu Na, if I were in their shoes, I would deal with them too. It's just that, perhaps his way of doing things is rather extreme, but that doesn't mean that he is evil. Yu nodded and said honestly, yes, I'm relieved now. I don't think he is evil anymore. Xiao Chen suddenly asked, Yu, do you believe in telepathy between Geminis? Yu was a little surprised to hear this. You seem to have mentioned this to me before. Yes, before I met you, I didn't know of your existence, but I would often dream of you. In the dream, I took your point of view. I felt that it was a little unbelievable, but those scenes were too real, so real that it was unbelievable. In this world, there are many things that can't be explained clearly by science as we know it. Xiaoyichen smiled as well. Chapter 40:17. Yes. I've mentioned to Daddy that I've always dreamed of you, but he didn't really believe me. At that time, he didn't know that you were still alive. It was only later that Daddy told me that you were weak when we were born. When the assistant arrived, you were already not breathing. They only took me away, but they didn't expect you to still be alive. Yu only lowered his head and didn't say anything. Xiaoyichen suddenly asked worriedly, "Then has he really left?" Yu did not say a word. Instead, he sucked in a deep breath of cold air and looked up at his father. His clear and limpid eyes gradually became clouded with gloominess. They kept churning, looking demonic yet frightening. He didn't say anything. Just by sitting on the swing, he emitted an aura that made Xiaoyichen feel inexplicably apprehensive. It's him. Yu didn't say anything, but his invisible aura made Xiaoyichen realize that the person in front of him wasn't the angel Yu, but the little devil Gong Fan. You seem to want me to leave. Gong Fan spoke. His tone made Xiaoyichen even more certain that Gong Fan hadn't left. Xiaoyichen was pleasantly surprised. He didn't know how to hide it, so this surprise jumped out from his eyes. You're still here, Gong Fan. You didn't leave. He was so excited that he hugged Gong Fan tightly. I really thought you left. You didn't leave. That's great. Gong Fan was so shocked that his eyes widened. He didn't expect Xiaoyichen to be so excited when he saw that he was still in this body. He could even imagine how lonely and disappointed Xiaoyichen would be when he saw that he hadn't left. But he didn't expect. Xiaoyichen hugged him tightly, but he felt a little awkward. He pushed him slightly, and his expression was unnatural and awkward. What are you doing? I'm just very happy. Xiaoyichen also realized that he had been too agitated. He immediately retracted his hand and adjusted his collar, feeling a little embarrassed. Gong Fan stared at him coldly, but his chest was inexplicably hot, as if he had been scalded by magma. Happy? He snorted. What's there to be happy about? Don't you feel unhappy that I didn't leave and took over this body? Xiaoyichen laughed. Why would I? No matter if it's you or him, you're both my younger brothers. I like both of you and I can't bear to let either of you go. You and him are the same. Gong Fan's eyelashes suddenly flickered, but he did not say anything. He turned his face away and heard Xiaoyichen say in surprise, but it was you just now. Why is it suddenly you? He's tired. At the mention of you, Gong Fan's eyes softened and were no longer filled with hostility. Tired? Yes. Gong Fan said calmly. He has been sleeping for too long and hasn't gotten used to this body yet, so he did not know how to explain this process. Xiaoyichen seemed to have sorted out his thoughts. Could it be that the two personalities Yu and Gong Fan had reached some kind of tacit understanding? Every personality needed to rest. Then, when this personality was resting, the other personality would come out and take over this body as Yun Tian Yu. When Yu rested, Gong Fan would come out. When Gong Fan was tired, Yu would return to this body. Chapter 40:18. If Yu rested, then Gong Fan would come out. If Gong Fan was tired, then Yu would return to this body? That should be the way to interpret it. Xiaoyichen did not probe further. It seemed that Gong Fan was in a bad state. He leaned against the swing, lowered his head and said to Xiaoyichen, "Let me be alone for a while." Although Xiaoyichen was a little worried, he knew that since Yu had appeared, it seemed that the two personalities had reached a consensus. That was good too. Since he had woken up from a nightmare, he was a little sleepy, so he went back to his room to rest. When he woke up in the afternoon, he changed into his home clothes and went to the living room. However, he saw Yun Shishir standing in the living room in a daze, staring at the tightly shut door of the dining room. She was also in a daze. At the same time, there was a strange expression on her face. Her eyes flickered as if some emotions were brewing. Xiaoqian walked to her side and gently tugged at her sleeve. He asked softly, "Mommy, what's wrong?" Yun Shishir finally reacted. She lowered her head and looked at Xiaoqian. After a while she regained her senses. "Who's in the kitchen?" I don't know either." Little Chen thought about it for a while and then asked tentatively, "Don't tell me it's you. You?" Yun Shishir furrowed her brows, her eyes throbbing a little more. Why is he in the kitchen? In fact, Yun Shishir knew very well that Gong Fan's personality. Yu knew nothing about cooking. He did not even know how to peel potatoes, let alone how to cook. However, there was indeed someone in the kitchen. If it was Yu, then it meant that he was back. However, when Yun Shishir realized that Yu was in the kitchen, she had already been in a daze for more than 10 minutes. She knew that Yu was in there, but she did not dare to confirm it. What if she was a nanny? Sometimes Muyaja would order the nanny to cook for them, but it was not every day. She was worried that the housekeeper would be the one cooking and not Yu. That kind of disappointment was something she didn't dare to bear. She couldn't bear it. Xiaoqian walked to the kitchen door and pushed it open. As expected, Yu was standing in front of the oven with gloves on. She carefully took out the handcuffed Orlin's wings. At that time, Yu had grown a lot taller and no longer needed to step on a small stool to cook. Yu put the tray aside and looked in the direction of the door. When she saw Xiaoqian, she smiled gently and said, "You're finally up?" Yu. Just as Xiaoqian said those two words, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Yun Shishir felt her mind go blank. She walked to the door and saw Yu standing in front of the oven with gloves on. At that moment, tears welled up in her eyes. "You!" When Yu saw Yun Shishir, he calmly took off his gloves and turned around. His face was full of tenderness. "Mommy, it's time to eat. Mommy." His tone alone made her feel a sense of warmth that she had not felt in a long time. It was him. It must be him. He, that little angel, the first ray of sunshine in her life, had finally returned to her side. Yu. Yun Shishir pounced on Yu and pulled him into her embrace, hugging him tightly. Chapter 40:19. It's you. She widened her eyes, wanting to see the child in front of her more clearly. She hurriedly wiped the corners of her eyes and forced her tears back. However, she couldn't swallow the sobs in her voice. She hugged Yu so tightly as if she was afraid that the next second, he would turn into a wisp of smoke and disappear from her sight. When Yu heard this, he sighed helplessly and gently stroked her silky hair. "Mommy is still such a crybaby." Yu, is it really you?" Yun Shishir pursed her lips and held back her sobs. "Mommy isn't dreaming, right?" Yu looked at her lovingly. "Mommy, if you're still not awake, you can go back to bed and continue lying down. I'll wake you up when dinner is ready." When Yun Shishir heard this, she couldn't stop crying. Based on this sentence alone, she was almost certain that the child in her arms wasn't Gong Fan but Yu. Only Yu would speak to her in such a doting tone. Yun Shishir was inexplicably touched. She hugged Yu tightly and was momentarily speechless. This was because when she opened her mouth, only broken sounds came out. She seemed to have experienced this feeling once before. She recalled that when she was young, one of Yuna's younger sisters came to visit and took away her favorite doll without her permission. When she came back from school, she couldn't find the doll no matter how hard she tried. She thought that she had accidentally lost the doll until the little girl came to visit again. She watched as the child held the doll in her arms. Then she realized that she hadn't accidentally lost the doll, but that the child had snatched it away. She didn't say anything at the scene. She waited until the child left before she was so upset that she started crying. Li Qin scolded her in front of Yun Na. After that, she found out that the little girl originally wanted Yun Na's doll. Naturally, Yun Na couldn't bear to part with it, so she stuffed the doll into her arms. After that, Yun Shishir was sad for a long time. It was only later on her birthday that Yun Yecheng secretly hid a gift box under her bed. That night, when Yun Shishir was about to go to bed, she found a note in the diary. On the note, Yun Yecheng had written that the gift was under the bed. It was only when she pulled the box out from under the bed that she realized that her father had secretly bought a doll behind Li Qin's back. This doll was identical to the one she had bought back then. Yun Shishir burst into tears as she hugged the doll that she had regained. It wasn't sadness, nor was it happiness. Instead, it was an indescribable emotion. It would not be an exaggeration to say that all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. She felt the same way when she hugged Yu. Yu caressed Yun Shirshir's face and gently wiped away her tears with her two small hands. However, her eyes turned red as well. "Mommy, I'm sorry for making you wait for so long." Just as he said this, his eyes turned even redder, but he was still smiling. It was just a smile, but his eyes narrowed slightly as tears welled up in them. Yun Shirshir's tears could not stop flowing. No matter how hard he tried to wipe them away, they continued to flow like pearls from a broken necklace. Yun Shirshir also wiped his tears for him. The mother-son pair wiped away their tears, crying and laughing at the same time. Xiaoyichen stood at the side. He felt an indescribable envy, but he also felt gratified. Chapter 40-20. The mother and son wiped away their tears, crying and laughing at the same time. Xiaoyichen stood by the side. He felt an indescribable sense of envy, but he also felt gratified. He was gratified because the mother and son were finally reunited. He was envious because no one could compare to the bond between his mother and Yu. Yu had always said that he relied on his mother. In fact, compared to him, Yun Shirshir relied on him more. She was the one who brought him into this world, but he was the one who saved her. No matter what, he could not compare to Yu's position in Yun Shirshir's heart. He knew very well that Yu meant a lot to his mother. Similarly, his mother meant a lot to Yu. However, he did not feel jealous. Xiaoyichen did not disturb them. Instead, he quietly left the dining room and left the door ajar to give them more space. The most touching thing was a reunion after a long separation. Although the two of them could not say much, just hugging like this was more than 1,000 words. The door was left ajar. After Xiaoyichen left, Yu finally spoke. "Mommy, don't cry. If you cry, I will feel sad." His heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Yun Shirshir pouted and complained to him coquettishly. "Mommy thought that I would never see you again. All this time, Mommy has been trying to think of a way. They all said that you have dissociative identity disorder, and that your first personality was killed. Mommy didn't believe it." As she spoke, she choked on her sobs and could not continue speaking. Yu's heart ached even more. Back then, when he had chosen to hibernate, he had hesitated. He could not let go of his mother. However, he knew that he could no longer control his second personality. He also felt tired. Hence, for a moment he had a selfish thought. He chose to hibernate to rest. He was tired. But now he regretted that decision. No matter what, nothing was more important than his mother. "Mommy, I was wrong." Yu lowered his head like a child who had done something wrong. He was sad and disappointed. "I've made you worry." Yun Shirshir just hugged him without saying anything. It wasn't that she didn't want to speak, but she couldn't. Ever since she found out that Yu's personality had been killed, she had not been able to sleep properly for a long time. She had never understood what dual personality disorder was. Was it an illness or something else? Therefore, she and Muyaja seriously flipped through the relevant information. Only then did she understand what dual personality disorder was. There were only about 1,000 cases of dual personality disorder in the world. Yu was one of them. Furthermore, other than dual personality disorder, there was also multiple personality disorder. Multiple personality disorder, as the name suggested, was to split into many different personalities. Other than the main personality, some of the personalities could be a young girl, some could be a knowledgeable professor, and some could be an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Between so many personalities, their memories were not interconnected. The personalities were independent and did not interfere with each other. There was even a record of 24 personalities. Yu only had 2 personalities, but generally speaking, dual personalities were independent of each other and didn't know of each other's existence. However, Yu vaguely knew. Yun Shirshir remembered that a professor had analyzed that perhaps Yu's sixth sense was especially sensitive. Before this, Yu's main personality had vaguely sensed the existence of another him. Chapter 40-21. Yun Shirshir remembered a professor's analysis that perhaps Yu's sixth sense was especially sensitive. Before this, Yu's main personality had vaguely sensed the existence of another him. However, the second personality did not know about the existence of the first personality. However, after being hypnotized by Alice, He created an illusory world. In this illusory world, the two personalities finally met. At that time, the second personality finally knew about the existence of the first personality. At that time, Gong Fan's personality also understood that if he wanted to replace Yu, he had to become the main personality. However, he did not know that the first personality could not be killed. However, after Yu fell into a deep sleep, he, as Yu, replaced the main personality. Therefore, when he faced Yun Shirshir, especially when he accidentally discovered Yun Shirshir holding Yu's photos in a daze, he felt a little sorry for her. He felt as if he had done something unforgivable. It was as if he had destroyed something beautiful and pure. For such a long time, he carried an indelible sense of guilt. As his feelings for Yun Shirshir grew closer, this sense of guilt tortured him constantly. However, Yun Shirshir did not resent Gong Fan at all. She deeply understood that whether it was Yu or Gong Fan, they were part of this life. Gong Fan's sins were not unforgivable. In the past, even if he was not the main personality, he had silently protected Yun Shirshir. After being hypnotized by Alice, although he had lost all his previous memories, his feelings for Yun Shirshir had formed an inseparable bond. Yun Shirshir did not favor anyone. However, at that time she felt that Yu, whose smile was as beautiful as crystal, would probably never return to her side. That was why she felt uncontrollably sad. Now that she had regained what she had lost, how could she not be agitated? In her agitation, she only knew how to cry. Yu looked at Yun Shirshir, who kept crying, and felt sad. "Mommy, didn't I come back? Don't cry, okay?" Yun Shirshir nodded her head, but her tears continued to roll down her cheeks. The more Yu looked at her, the more heartbroken he felt. He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, "It's okay now. Just cry." "What's wrong with crying?" Yu gently wiped away her tears and sighed again. "But if you cry too much, your eyes will definitely be swollen. It won't look good." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she could not help but laugh through her tears. "Do you still care about your looks?" Yun Shirshir sobbed as she put her arms around Yu's neck. "My Yu is back. How can I care about my swollen eyes?" She asked again. "Will you suddenly disappear again one day?" When Yu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. "I will never disappear." "Really?" Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, was somewhat skeptical. Of course, she had heard Gong Xiaoying mention before that the dominant personality would never disappear. However, she was still a little nervous. She was worried that tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or even the day after that, Yu would suddenly disappear and be replaced by Gong Fan. Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't worry, Mommy. I won't leave you again. I definitely won't. Don't worry, okay?" Chapter 40-22. Yun Shirshir nodded and suddenly thought of something. Her eyes narrowed and she asked tentatively, "Well, what about him?" "Huh. Previously Alice said that your personality was killed. I always thought." Yun Shirshir calmed herself down and said sadly, "I thought you would never come back, so." "He is not dead. He is still here, but I don't know when he will come back." Yu continued, "But Mommy will definitely see him again." Yun Shirshir was relieved to hear this, but she was worried about something else. "You two coexist?" "Yes. But your body won't be able to hold on, right?" Yu did not answer this question directly because even he did not know how long the two personalities could last. "Mommy, you don't have to worry about this. Even if you do, you can't do anything." Yun Shirshir did not say anything else. Xingyu Financial Group. In the president's office, Mu Yaja was looking at his laptop, but his eyes were in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. He didn't know why, but since yesterday, his heart had been inexplicably uneasy. His cell phone suddenly rang. He picked it up and saw that it was Yun Shirshir. He was a little surprised. If there were no special circumstances, Yun Shirshir would not call him when he was working. Either she had encountered something troublesome or he did not dare to think too much and asked nervously, "What's wrong? Shirshir? Are you coming back for lunch? What's wrong? What's the matter?" Under normal circumstances, he would eat at the company, but she suddenly asked him if he was coming home for lunch. He became more and more suspicious that something had happened. "Nothing much. If you are free, come back for lunch with me at noon. How about it?" Muyaja raised his eyebrows. Hearing her brisk tone, his heart calmed down. Okay, madam invited me. How can I not reply? Did you peek at my script? Why are you speaking like an ancient person? Muyaja gently curled the corner of his lips and said indifferently, ever since you accepted this role, you've been holding on to the script. Of course, your husband wants to see what kind of script has you so captivated. I knew it. Yun Shirshir pouted and immediately said, all right, I won't joke around anymore. Come back soon. Yu has prepared a surprise for you. Yu? Sure, you can't reveal confidential information. Yun Shirshir was probably worried that she would reveal too much, so she quickly hung up the phone. Muyaja put his phone away and closed his laptop. He immediately stood up and walked to the door, where he bumped into Lu Jinyu. Lu Jinyu was looking for him. Boss, what are we eating for lunch today? Muyaja glanced at him. You can eat it yourself. Lu Jinyu sized him up suspiciously. Why? Aren't you coming with me? No. Did you make an appointment with someone? Lu Jinyu even pretended to sniff. Hey, who did our boss make an appointment with for lunch? There's something fishy going on. I have to report it to sister-in-law. Sure. I'll go home for lunch. You can report it to her. Lu Jinyu loved to snitch. Usually, he would tell Yun Shirshir where he went and who he was socializing with. What? Go home for lunch? This was unprecedented. Chapter 40-23. When Lu Jinyu heard this, he laughed wickedly. Sister-in-law specially prepared lunch? I want one too. I'll go back with you. Freeload? Let's meet face to face. What? Lu Jinyu muttered. You don't have the spirit to share at all. If you say anything more, you'll lose your annual leave. I wouldn't dare. Lu Jinyu immediately stood respectfully and hurriedly said, Chief, let's go home and eat. Be careful on the road. With a wave of his handkerchief, Muyaja floated away. He drove home and parked the car in the garage. When he opened the door, he smelled a fragrant aroma. New Orleans roasted wings? His nose was sensitive and he could even smell what was being cooked in the afternoon. Yun Shirshir was standing in the dining room, setting the table. When she saw that he had returned, she immediately went up to him and happily wrapped her arms around his waist. Her tone was as gentle as it could be. You're back. Her light tone sounded like she was in a good mood. Muyaja ruffled her hair and looked at her lovingly. You seem to be in a good mood today. Is there anything worth celebrating? Of course there is. Yun Shirshir hugged him and rubbed against his chest coquettishly. Then she turned around and said to the kitchen, Yu, is it done? It's done. Muyaja looked in the direction of the voice and saw Yu walking out with a soup pot. When he saw Yu wearing an apron, he was surprised for a moment. This was because Muyaja's personality was extremely bad at cooking. He also didn't know how to do housework. However, he had inherited Muyaja's outstanding talent in military and business matters. Usually, when Xingyu encountered any difficult cases, he would be able to give advice and suggestions. However, when it came to housework, he was completely clueless. Only Yuyu's personality was good at doing housework. Muyaja looked suspiciously at Yun Shirshir, and then at Yuyu. Yuyu carried the soup pot to the table, and then looked up at Muyaja with a gentle smile. Daddy, let's eat. Oh? Muyaja became even more bewildered. His eyes widened in disbelief. How can you cook? He then looked at Yun Shirshir, only to see that Yun Shirshir was deliberately keeping him in suspense, but she didn't say anything. When Yuyu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. Mommy, didn't you tell Daddy about this? No, you can tell him yourself. As she said this, Yun Shirshir sat down at the table and looked at the table full of dishes that Yuyu had prepared. She was drooling. Yuyu frowned helplessly and looked at Muyaja. She cleared her throat awkwardly and said proudly, What's the matter? Daddy doesn't seem to welcome me back? If Muyaja still didn't understand what was going on, then he wouldn't be Muyaja. It's you? Muyaja was extremely surprised. You're back. Yuyu nodded and said calmly, You don't welcome me back? Why are you acting so indifferent? Muyaja didn't know why, but his body stiffened. He couldn't believe it and he was so agitated that his whole body started to tremble. Come here. He bent down slightly until they were eye level. Then he gently opened his arms and said, "Come here." Yu Yu pursed her lips and walked towards him. When she was in front of him, she put her hands behind her back bashfully and her cheeks were strangely red. Chapter 40-24. Wuxia finally recognized him. The person standing in front of him wasn't Gong Fan but Yu Yu. That innocent, pure, adorable and kind Yu Yu. That considerate and gentle Yu Yu. Wuxia felt as if he was about to suffocate. He was choking and choking. "Yu Yu." He called out his name but his voice was hoarse. Even though he hadn't seen him for so long, he didn't find him unfamiliar at all. It was as if the scene of Yu Yu standing in front of him was still yesterday. "Daddy?" He sucked in a breath of cold air, opened his bright eyes again and opened his trembling arms. Wuxia saw that his fingertips were trembling nervously. His heart ached even more as he looked at him. He went forward slightly and hugged him tightly. "You're back." He sighed emotionally with a bitter expression. Yu Yu was touched when he heard this. While he was unconscious, tears flowed out of his eyes uncontrollably. He could hear how much Wuxia missed him. It had been so long. More than a year. He had been in a deep sleep. Daddy must have been waiting for him to come back. Just like Mommy. Xiaoqian walked out of the corridor and happened to see this scene. He didn't know why, but he also felt extremely touched. He hid in a corner and secretly watched. After a while, he walked to Yun Shishir's side and hugged her waist to watch this scene with her. The father and son didn't seem to be like the relationship between Yun Shishir and Yu Yu. They didn't talk much and didn't make much physical contact. They just hugged each other like this. However, for some reason, Yun Shishir felt an inexplicable heartache for him. However, it also gave her a very warm feeling. This was the bond between Wuxia and Yu Yu that couldn't be severed. In fact, it was different from Yun Shishir. Wuxia was a man, and a man's emotional expression was not as rich as a woman's. Usually, he did not reveal his emotions and did not speak much. Sometimes, when Yun Shishir missed Yu Yu so much that she could not sleep well at night, Wuxia would comfort her and make it seem like it was an understatement. What was the truth? Wuxia's longing for Yu Yu had never diminished. Hugging Yu Yu, Wuxia let out a long sigh and said in a deep voice, "Yu Yu, I miss you so much." These words made the boy's tears flow out of his eyes. He held back his tears, pursed his lips, and hugged his neck even tighter. "Daddy, I miss you too." Yu Yu hugged him and said sadly and emotionally, "I miss you all the time." They had been looking forward to this moment of reunion for so long. Now that they were finally seeing each other again, Yu Yu felt as if there was hot lava gathering in his chest and flowing against his blood to his head and limbs. When Yun Shishir saw this scene, she felt as if her heart had been injected with countless things called warmth. She did not dare to disturb them, nor could she bear to disturb them. She just watched as they hugged each other. It was so quiet that even their breathing was very, very light. When Wuxia sat at the dining table with Yu Yu in his arms and looked at the sumptuous spread on the table, he felt very emotional. "It seems like it's been a long time since I've eaten Yu Yu's cooking." When he said this, Yu Yu found it strange and asked, "He doesn't know how to cook?" They knew very well who Yu Yu was referring to. Chapter 40-25. Little Ichin immediately replied, "No, I don't. He doesn't know how to cook or do any housework." He paused for a moment before he added, "But he is much smarter than Yu Yu." Also, when Yu Yu heard this, he lifted his eyes and looked at Xiaoqian with a kind expression. With just one look, Xiaoqian felt as though he had seen hell through his eyes. Xiaoqian said, Yu Yu is still the cutest." Yu Yu finally stopped looking at him. He blinked his eyes gently and snorted. "At least you know what's good for you." Xiaoqian laughed and immediately covered his face. However, he thought to himself, "Is this really not Gong Fan? Is this really the gentle and considerate Yu Yu? Why does he suddenly have a kind expression that only Gong Fan has?" It was so scary. When Yun Shishir saw this, she couldn't help feeling a little cold. "Your expression just now was so scary." Xiaoqian was so scared that he didn't even dare to eat his chicken wing. Xiaoqian hugged his rice bowl and lowered his head to eat his rice. Wuxia was curious. "You don't know what kind of personality he has?" Yu Yu didn't seem to understand. Wuxia didn't know how to explain it. It was hard for him to put it into words. Yun Shirshir immediately explained on behalf of Muyaja. What your daddy wants to ask is how he usually is and what he does. Don't you know? Yu shook his head. I don't know. I only know that he must be a very cold child. However, since he is very gentle with mommy, I reserve the right to let him exist. When Xiaoyichen heard this, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine. It turned out that Yu was the final boss. Gong Fan was so scary and terrifying. However, the only thing that determined his existence was Yu, who was smiling as innocently as a little white flower. He was the real demon king hiding behind Gong Fan. I haven't cooked in a long time. I don't know if my culinary skills are still as good as before. Yu asked Yun Shirshir. Mommy, does my cooking taste good? It's delicious. Don't you think it's delicious? Yu licked his lips and said worriedly. My sense of taste seems to have lost its sensitivity. Oh, yesterday. He ate too much bitter gourd, so his taste buds are a little off. Yu was rather disgusted when he heard that. Why would he want to eat bitter gourd? Because he played a game with me and lost. Xiaoyichen said proudly. The loser had to eat all the bitter gourd. Hence, he took all the bitter gourd. When he brushed his teeth at night, he said that he couldn't even taste the toothpaste. That's probably the reason. Yu's eyes were filled with disdain. He didn't expect Gong Fan to have such a childish side. It was unimaginable. He had always thought that Gong Jia was the kind of child who was cold and serious and would never play with Xiaoyichen. Muyaja commented. It's much better than before. Yun Shirshir said. It must be because you haven't tasted Yu's cooking for too long. Who has been cooking for so long? Yu suddenly asked. Yun Shirshir and Xiaoyichen looked at each other and said awkwardly. The nanny. Yu was speechless. He had thought that mommy would cook for them herself. He didn't expect her to be so lazy. Chapter 40-26. After Yu's return, the family finally regained some vitality. The so-called vitality was hard to describe with words. At least, Yun Shirshir was no longer suffering from insomnia and could finally sleep soundly at night. At night, Yu was reading a book. He had the habit of reading, something that Gong Fan did not do. Xiaoyichen snuck into the room. Seeing that he was holding a book and reading with great interest, he did not have the heart to disturb him. Instead, he moved a chair and sat beside him. He rested his chin on his hand and looked at him quietly. Yu saw him walk in from the corner of his eye. He thought that he was going to disturb his reading and pester him to play with him. However, he was a little surprised when he realized that he was just sitting there quietly and did not make any requests. He put down his book and looked at Xiaoyichen. He was a little surprised and asked, What are you doing? Xiaoyichen rested his chin on his hand lazily and looked at him. He said jealously, Do you know what I envy the most about you? Xiaoyichen said honestly. No matter which personality it is, whether it's Gong Fan or you, your studies are top-notch. Why don't I have the talent for studying? Yu smiled when he heard this. No matter which personality it is, they are all smart. I envy you too. Oh. When Xiaoyichen heard that Yu was envious of him, he asked eagerly, What are you envious of? I envy your stupidity. Xiaoyichen was confused. Huh? Stupidity? Yu said matter-of-factly. You know, fortune favors fools. Usually, those who are a little stupid don't think too much and don't worry too much. You see, the smarter the person, the more troubled they are. However, those fools and idiots are happy every day. I don't know what they are happy about. Xiaoyichen was speechless. He thought that Yu was going to praise him. However, he was shot in the knee. So infuriating. Xiaoyichen hugged his arms angrily and glared at Yu. I'm your brother. How can you bully me like this? Yu raised her eyebrows and did not say anything. Suddenly, she thought of something and asked curiously, Do you know the girl who sits next to me? Ching. Yu racked her brains for a long time, but she could not remember her name. Think so. After Yu returned, he did not delay his studies and was now in the 4th grade. Today, when he went to class, the girl sitting next to him seemed to treat him differently. At first, she seemed to be very afraid of me, but I kept seeing the way she looked at me. It was a little special, but I couldn't describe it. It just felt weird. Yes, Chinger likes you. Xiaoyichen smiled. In the past, when you weren't around and Gong Fan was you, he was known to be a cold prince in school. Prince? When Yu Yu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. Were all little girls nowadays so childish? How could she use the word prince to describe a boy? Yu Yu asked curiously, what was Gong Fan like in school? He didn't like to talk much. No matter who he was to, he was cold and aloof. His grades were especially good. He was the kind who could easily get first place in school. Chapter 40:27. Yu Yu was a little stunned. Were girls so precocious these days? She was already experiencing her first awakening of love. Then what about you? Xiaoyi Chen was a little surprised when he heard this. Yu Yu, are you concerned about me? I'm so touched. Yu Yu replied. Just take it that you're concerned about me. Xiaoyi Chen became proud. I play very well with the boys in school. You have a lot of brothers. Yes. Why? Yu Yu raised his eyebrows. Why aren't you popular with the girls? I don't usually like to play with girls. Xiaoyi Chen continued. Girls don't know how to play football or basketball. They can't even swing a tennis racket, so we can't play together. I see. Yu Yu picked up his book again and started reading quietly. Xiaoyi Chen yawned a few times and rubbed his eyes. He was sleepy, so he stood up and went back to his room to rest. Xiaoyi Chen and Yu Yu were in the same school and class. They sat in the same row, front and back. However, the two people's results were very different. Xiaoyi Chen wasn't bad at his studies, but he didn't like to study. Yun Shishir wasn't strict in this aspect. To her, Xiaoyi Chen and Yu Yu were at the age when they were the least stressed. It wouldn't be too late for them to focus on their studies when they were in junior high school. They should play well in elementary school. Moreover, boys in elementary school were very energetic. She didn't want her two children to be bookworms who only knew how to study. Yu Yu was different. He liked to read. Although Gong Fan wasn't as interested in books as Yu Yu, he liked to read many reference books and foreign books. He also liked to read novels, mystery books, and suspense books. On the other hand, Xiaoyi Chen was very playful. He played soccer, basketball, and especially tennis. His skills were top-notch. In this aspect, Yun Shishir was more indulgent. She even learned how to play tennis. When she had nothing to do, she would play with Xiaoyi Chen. But in the end it was embarrassing. She was an adult, but she couldn't play as well as Xiaoyi Chen. Xiaoyi Chen and Yu Yu were quite popular in school. Don't look down on children nowadays. They are all very mature. Girls liked to watch idol dramas and began to read romance novels. They also had hazy fantasies about love. There were also two couples in Yu Yu's class. However, Yu Yu did not like to play with girls. During class that day, Yu Yu came to class. Just as she was about to put her bag on the table, she found something in it. She took it out and it turned out to be a box of Godivan chocolates. The quality of the chocolate was not low, and the price was not low either. A box only cost a few yuan, but it cost a few hundred yuan. The school he attended was the most famous elite school in the capital. Most of the children who studied here were born rich and had extraordinary family backgrounds. Their pocket money for a day was equivalent to a month's salary for an ordinary wage earner. It was natural for them to be able to afford such expensive chocolates. Yu Yu stared at the chocolates in a daze. She wondered who had sneakily stuffed them into her desk. Her deskmate Qing'er returned to her seat. When she saw the chocolates in Yu Yu's hand, she blushed but did not say anything. She sat upright in her seat and took a book to cover her blushing face. Chapter 40:28. From the looks of it, this box of chocolates was a gift from Qing'er. However, he didn't eat chocolate. Xiaoyi Chen, who was behind him, stuck his head out and smelled the aroma of chocolate. He moved closer to Yu Yu, and was a little surprised to see him holding a box of chocolates. Wow, chocolate! Where did you get it? Yu Yu replied honestly, I don't know. I don't know who gave it to me. You don't know who gave it to you? Yeah, I saw it on my desk when I came this morning. Oh, Xiaoyi Chen smiled and asked tentatively, can I eat it? Yu Yu smiled and said, what if you gave it to the wrong person? Maybe it's not for me. Xiaoyi Chen immediately said, that's impossible. Since it's on your desk, it must be for you. With that said, he picked up a piece of chocolate and stuffed it into his mouth. The rich chocolate melted in his mouth and touched his snow-white teeth. Xiaoyi Chen exclaimed that it was delicious. His exclamation attracted the attention of the others. When they heard that there was something delicious, the other students in the class who had arrived early also gathered around. When they saw Yu holding a box of chocolates, they were pleasantly surprised. Some had only seen it but not eaten it. Some had eaten it often. They heard a child say with a red face, "This chocolate is delicious. My mom bought a box last time and I finished it all in one night." "Really? It's delicious. Yu, I want to eat it too. Can I eat it?" "I want to eat it too." Yu was very generous. He placed the box on the table and said with a smile, "If you want to eat it, go ahead." In no time at all, the box of chocolates was quickly emptied. At this moment, Qing'er's expression changed. She looked at the classmates with dissatisfaction and asked Yu, "Yu, aren't you going to eat it?" She was still a little angry as she said, "If you all finish the chocolates, what will Yu eat?" Xiaoqian didn't know what was going on. With his low EQ, he snorted and said, "You didn't give it to him. Why are you so agitated?" When Qing'er heard this, she felt even more embarrassed. She muttered, "How am I agitated? I saw that Yu didn't eat a single piece, so I felt wronged for him." The classmates looked at each other and smiled. "Yeah, Yu, aren't you going to eat?" Yu is too generous. He gave the chocolates to others but didn't get to eat any himself. The boy smiled faintly. "I don't like chocolate. It's fine as long as you think it's delicious." He didn't know how many people were mesmerized by his smile. Yu looked very good when he smiled. It was especially charming. He didn't smile as brightly as Xiaoqian. He only curved his lips slightly, revealing his white teeth. His delicate eyebrows relaxed and his eyes curved like crescent moons. It was especially beautiful. Although he was young, he still had a gentle temperament. Even Qing'er couldn't help but stare blankly at his exquisite side profile. She didn't regain her senses for a long time. "Yu, you're smiling again. Yu looks really good when he smiles." The group of children looked as if they had discovered a new world. They pointed at Yu and made a big fuss. Yu, on the other hand, was scared out of his wits. Xiaoqian saw that he was in a daze and immediately explained, "You rarely smiled in the past, so of course they're making a fuss over nothing." Chapter 40-29. As he said this, he put his arm around Yu's shoulder and boasted to the others, "My brother looks good when he smiles. Don't crowd around here. It's almost time for the morning reading." As soon as he said this, a group of girls excitedly squeezed past Xiaoqian and started talking to Yu. "Yu, smile again. You look especially charming when you smile. Smile again." Qing'er was a little uncomfortable. In fact, Yu had already guessed that she was the one who had given him this box of God-Ivan chocolates. She had saved up some pocket money and bought a gift box. She was the first to arrive in class and secretly stuffed the box of chocolates into her desk. In the end, Yu came and opened the box of chocolates. She secretly observed him but still did not see any change in his expression. She thought that he did not like it. In the end, the group of people crowded around her. Before long, all the chocolates were snatched away. She could not help but feel a little angry. This box of chocolates was a gift from her to Yu. Even if he did not like them, they would be eaten by irrelevant people if they were to rot in his hands. Qing'er was a little angry. Yu also observed her expression but did not say anything. During the morning reading, Qing'er was still angry when Yu suddenly passed her a neatly cut note. She was a little surprised and pleasantly surprised. She took the note and saw a line of delicate and beautiful handwriting. "Thank you for the chocolates." Qing'er looked up in surprise and saw Yu looking at her sideways. He raised his eyebrows and blinked. It meant that he knew that this box of chocolates was from her. Qing'er did not know why, but she felt wronged and replied to him, "The chocolates are for you, but you didn't eat a single piece. I'm so angry." There was even an angry emoticon at the end. After a while, another note was passed over. It said, "I don't like chocolates, but isn't it good to share good food with everyone?" There was also a warm emoticon at the end. Qing'er finally mustered her courage and replied, "Can I talk to you?" Yu was a little surprised when she saw this. Had she not spoken to him even though they had been desk mates for so long? No wonder Qing'er felt a little jealous when she saw him smiling at the other students. It seemed that Gong Fan usually did not talk to her. In fact, that was indeed the case. Qing'er had once mustered up the courage to talk to Gong Fan, but in the end, she was blocked by Gong Fan's cold gaze. He was so scared that he almost cried. After a while, Yu Yu's note arrived. Sure. Happy face when Qing'er saw this. She smiled knowingly and carefully kept the note into the pencil case, as if she had found a treasure. This was the note that Yu Yu had sent to her. It was also the first note that she had sent to him. Moreover, she could finally talk to the boy she liked. In the future, they should also become good friends, right? Qing'er liked Yu Yu, and it was not a superficial kind of like. Instead, it was a form of worship and adoration. Yu Yu had good grades and was good-looking. The teachers doted on him a lot, and all the students in the class liked him. However, Gong Fan's personality was more cold. Other than Xiaoi Chen, no matter who it was, he was cold and indifferent. However, the other children all felt that this kind of personality was very cool. Especially when Gong Fan casually answered those questions that were enough to leave many students in a terrible state. Their admiration for him was even more evident in their words and expressions. Chapter 40-30. However, one day, Gong Fan was no longer as cold as before. After Yu Yu returned to school, he was no longer as cold as before. Gradually, some children mustered up the courage to talk to him. Although they were afraid that Yu Yu would reject them or treat them coldly, they pretended not to see or hear him. In the end, the gentle Yu Yu responded to them with a smile. This encouraged the children in the class, and they all went up to talk to him. Only Qing'er did not dare to. In the past, she had mustered up the courage to speak to Gong Fan, but Gong Fan did not even look at her in the eye. Qing'er became a little disappointed. She thought that Gong Fan hated her. This time, Yu Yu replied to her with a note, which encouraged her. When class was over, she sat in her seat, hesitating. The children in the class had run to the corridor to play. The field was downstairs. Some children took the opportunity to play games on the field after class. There were only a few people left in the classroom. Yu Yu sat in his seat and was reading a mystery novel. Qing'er took a look and saw that the title of the book was in English. Although she had studied English for 3 years, she still found it difficult to understand. Yu Yu looked very charming when he was reading. He lowered his head. The morning light seemed to have plated a layer of silver on his face. He was engrossed in reading. His fair jade-like fingers pinched the pages of the book and flipped a page from time to time. Qing'er looked around and finally mustered up the courage to speak. Yu Yu, what book are you reading? Yu Yu was pulled back from his thoughts by her voice. He returned to his senses and said calmly, Murder on the Orient Express. Wow, this book title sounds so scary. It's a mystery novel. I've read the translation before, but this is the original book. I plan to read it again. After a pause, Yu Yu explained again. I like reading mystery novels. Mystery novels? Qing'er thought for a moment and immediately thought of it. Mystery novels, are they the same as Detective Conan? Yes. I've also watched Detective Conan before. It's very good. That means that we all like the same things. I like to reason too. Qing'er wanted to get closer to Yu Yu. Yu Yu could tell that Qing'er was trying to get closer to him, but he did not say anything. Instead, he turned around and continued to focus on his novel. Qing'er saw that he was so absorbed in reading the novel, and she didn't have the heart to disturb him. But seeing that there was no one in the classroom, if she missed this gathering, perhaps the next opportunity to talk to him, she didn't know when would be. She finally gathered her courage and asked, Can we be friends? Yu Yu frowned and smiled helplessly. Aren't we friends now? Because of this smile, Qing'er's heart skipped a beat and she lost her mind. She lowered her head shyly and said sheepishly, Are we considered friends? Yeah, I guess so. Yu Yu smiled again and said, All the classmates in this class are my friends, aren't they? Qing'er's face froze when she heard this. She looked at Yu Yu in a daze and felt a little disappointed. Her disappointment was so obvious that Yu Yu couldn't help but ask, What's wrong with you? Why do you look like that? Chapter 40-31. Qing'er's face froze when she heard this. She looked at Yu Yu in a daze and felt a little disappointed. Her disappointment was so obvious that Yu Yu couldn't help but ask, What's the matter with you? Why do you look like that? I'm talking about friends, not friends like this. Then what kind? I hope that my friendship with Yu Yu is special. That is, she couldn't describe that feeling. Chinger's words were a little clumsy, but in reality, she hoped that she could become Yu Yu's most special friend. She hoped that they could share each other's secrets, and that their friendship would be better than that of the other children in class. His only good friend. His best friend. But Chinger couldn't bring herself to say it. But she blamed herself for being too greedy. She was already extremely lucky to be able to talk to Yu Yu. Why did she have to ask for so much? In any case, she could talk to Yu Yu now. Then from now on we're good friends, right? Yu Yu replied with an and lowered his head to continue reading his novel. Chinger didn't want to disturb Yu Yu any further. She didn't want to annoy Yu Yu, so she leaned on the table obediently. When Yu Yu wasn't looking, she took out the piece of paper with Yu Yu's handwriting and read it a few times. The more she read, the more she liked it. Yu Yu's handwriting was so beautiful. He must have been practicing writing with a fountain pen since he was young. She had the habit of practicing writing when she was young, but she couldn't persevere. Even though she couldn't persevere, she still practiced for a long time. But now, her handwriting wasn't as beautiful as Yu Yu's. After school in the car, Xiaoyichen saw Yu Yu looking out of the window quietly. He nudged his elbow gently. Have you finished your homework? Yu Yu glanced at him. Although it was just a glance, he knew what was on his mind. Do you want to copy it? Oh. Xiaoyichen was instantly embarrassed. What do you mean by copying? It's just a reference. What's there to learn from the answer? Yu Yu, don't be so cruel. Let me have a look. I want to see what kind of thoughts you have when doing the questions. You dozed off during class. It's obvious that you don't know how to do the questions. You're starting to get serious. Yu Yu paused and glanced at him with disdain. But you're obviously using your serious energy in the wrong place. Xiaoyichen pouted and started to play the tender card. Big brother loves you. Brother dotes on you. You're my favorite little brother. With that, Xiaoyichen pouted and moved closer to Yu Yu to kiss him. Yu Yu slapped his face in disdain. Stay away from me. I'm allergic to idiots. Xiaoyichen was stunned when he heard this. He said a name in a daze. Gong Fan. When Yu Yu looked back, his gaze was no longer gentle. Instead, it was cold and indifferent. Xiaoyichen was no stranger to him. What's wrong? Little Yichen opened his mouth, wanting to cry out in alarm, but when he met his uncle's cold gaze, he swallowed it back down his throat. It's you. He pursed his lips and stopped talking. Gong Fan looked out of the window and glanced at Xiaoyichen. He was a little confused. Where are we? In the car. What car? Chapter 4032. In the car. Gong Fan frowned but did not say anything. Xiaoyichen explained. This is the car that's going home. We've already finished school. Oh. When Gong Fan heard this, he did not say anything else. Instead, he closed his eyes and rested. Xiaoyichen did not dare to say anything. He curled up in a corner and shivered. How did this guy's personality change so quickly? Oh my god. It seemed that he could not speak ill of Gong Fan while he was Yu Yu's personality. It just so happened that this guy had changed his personality. If Gong Fan heard it, he might not be able to bear the consequences. Fortunately, Xiaoyichen was glad that he did not say anything bad about Gong Fan just now. The change of personality was an extremely short process. Perhaps in the blink of an eye, Gong Fan would replace Yu Yu's personality and take over this body. This process often happened in a very short period of time. Perhaps in the blink of an eye the personality changed. When they reached home, Yun Shishir saw Yu Yu and greeted him warmly. However, she realized that the child in her arms had changed a little. He was no longer Yu Yu. Instead, he had become Gong Fan. Yun Shishir was a little surprised, but she did not reveal it. She was worried that her reaction would be too abrupt and cause Gong Fan to misunderstand and think that she did not welcome his personality. Gong Fan was an extremely sensitive personality. Perhaps it was because of his inferiority complex, uneasiness, and unstable life that caused him to have a repressed state of mind. He had always thought that he was not welcome. Hence, when Yu Yu returned, this sensitive mood escalated. Before going to bed at night, Yun Shishir told the two children a bedtime story as usual. Before leaving, when Yun Shishir leaned over to give him a goodnight kiss, Gong Fan, who was wrapped in the blanket, finally asked uneasily, Mommy, will you not love me in the future? Yun Shishir was not surprised that he would ask this, but she was surprised by his emotions. She had never felt so disappointed before. Yu was back. From then on, he was no longer the most special one. The love that was supposed to be shared equally with Yue Yao and Xiaoqian was now shared equally with Yu. He felt that it was unfair, but there was nothing he could do. In fact, he even felt that Yu was doing him a favor by keeping his personality. On one hand, he rejected this charity, but on the other hand, he longed for it. That time in his sleep, he had awakened Yu's personality, and even used his will to induce Yu's personality to kill him. However, just as he was about to suffocate, his tears began to flow. He began to feel uneasy, reluctant to part with her. He missed the warmth that Yun Shishir gave him and the warmth that the Mu family gave him. Even if it was struggling at death's door, even if it had to wag its tail and beg for mercy, it still wanted to occupy a place in this body. He did not need too much warmth. Even if it was just a goodnight kiss, it would make him yearn for this world. In the end, he compromised. He compromised to his own greed. It was rare for him to put down his pride and reveal a humility that he had never shown before. "Let me stay, okay?" When Yu heard this, her heart ached as she hugged him. At this point, the two personalities had merged and coexisted. Yu knew that keeping Gongfan's personality would definitely be a burden to his mental strength. His body was destined to be unable to bear it. Such a burden, when Gongfan revealed his weak side, should be eliminated in one fell swoop, expelled from his body and erased. Chapter 40-33. Yu knew that keeping Gongfan's personality would definitely be a burden to his mental strength. His body was destined to be unable to bear it. When Gongfan revealed his weak side, he should get rid of such a burden in one fell swoop, expel him from his body and wipe him out. However, he still could not do it. Hence, Yu and Gongfan reached a consensus. The two personalities would take turns to appear, and could not dominate each other for a long time. However, Gongfan still felt uneasy. He was afraid that he would become a burden. He was afraid that Yun Shishir would hate his existence. "Mommy, will you hate me?" Yun Shishir felt strange when she heard this. Beside her, Xiaoqian had already fallen asleep. Hence, she lowered her head and asked in a low voice, "Why are you asking such a strange question?" "Because I'm afraid that one day Mommy will hate me." As Gongfan said this, he felt a little sad and guilty. He felt that this body did not belong to him, but he was clinging to it and occupying it. He could not bear to disappear and leave. Could it be that Yun Shishir did not love him at all, and was just waiting for Yu to return? Now that Yu was back, Mommy should know about this, right? Then would she start to dislike him? Gongfan felt uneasy. This was the only thing that made him feel uneasy. It seemed that nothing else could affect his emotions. Only things related to Yun Shishir were the things that he cared about the most and could affect his emotions the most. "Mommy, if one day you feel that I'm a hindrance, don't hate me. Tell me that you don't like me and that you prefer Yu. I will leave on my own accord. However, please leave him with his last dignity. Don't chase him away, don't hate him." Other than that, he had no other requests. Yun Shishir's heart ached when she heard this. She did not know why Gongfan would say such things. She had always known that what this child lacked the most was a sense of security. However, she did not expect him to be so sensitive that he would let his imagination run wild. However, what Gongfan was worried about was also what she was worried about. She was worried that with the two personalities coexisting, Yu would not be able to hold on any longer. However, she did not blame Gongfan. He wasn't the only one who was to blame. How could she blame him? However, she was also in a dilemma. Whether it was Gongfan or Yu, she couldn't bear to part with them. But if she wanted to keep Gongfan's personality for her own selfish reasons, what if Yu couldn't take it? If that happened, she would never be able to forgive herself. However, if he wanted to protect Yu, would he have to chase Gongfan away? Was there no way to satisfy both sides? At least don't be so cruel. Don't overthink it. Why would Mommy hate you? Gongfan said uneasily. If there comes a day when I have no choice but to disappear, I will definitely disappear obediently. Whether Mommy remembers me or not, loves me or misses me, I will always love Mommy the most. This sentence touched her deeply. Yun Shishir hugged him tenderly and sighed. Don't let your imagination run wild. Mommy won't hate you or not love you. Whether it's you or you, both of you are mommy's favorite. Mommy loves you and will always love you. Don't let your imagination run wild, okay? Sleep early. When Gong Fan heard this, he fell asleep peacefully. Chapter 40-34. When Gong Fan heard this, he felt at ease because of her words. He closed his eyes and fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, Xiaoyichen was the first to wake up. After brushing his teeth and washing his face, he realized that Gong Fan had not woken up yet. Then he realized that Yu was more sleepy than before. He did not know if he should call him Yu or Gong Fan. However, he vaguely realized that Yu must still be sleeping, and that the person in this body must be Gong Fan. Yun Shishir pushed open the door and saw that Yu was still sleeping. Hence, she instructed Xiaoyichen to wake him up. Xiaoyichen felt a little wronged. He pouted and said, "Mommy, what if he is Gong Fan? Gong Fan has a terrible temper when he wakes up. He will throw a tantrum at me but not at you. Why don't you wake him up?" When Yun Shishir heard this, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. Indeed, Gong Fan was indeed a little autistic and not easy to get along with. He was special to her, but to others he was extremely cold. Hence Xiaoyichen was a little afraid. It was not that he was afraid, but when Gong Fan got angry it was really quite scary. Yun Shishir walked to the bed and gently pushed Yu. She said gently, "Yu, wake up, wake up." Hearing her gentle voice, Yu's thick eyelashes fluttered slightly and he finally opened his dark eyes. His gaze was dazed for a moment. When he saw Yun Shishir's face, he snuggled into her arms and buried his face in her chest. Like a kitten acting coquettishly, he rubbed against her. "Mommy, good morning." Yun Shishir gave him a morning kiss. When Xiaoyichen saw this, he was a little jealous. He paced around at the side and leaned forward to ask for a kiss. "Mommy, I want a morning kiss too." "Me too." Okay. I'll give you a morning kiss too." After Yun Shishir gave Xiaoyichen a kiss, the latter was finally satisfied. After breakfast, the driver sent the two children to school. When they arrived at the classroom, Gong Fan sat in his seat. Qinger, who was beside him, immediately greeted him with a smile. "Morning, Yu." Gong Fan did not react at first. He did not even see that there was someone beside him. When he heard Qinger greeting him, he pretended not to hear it. Qinger felt a little different. However, she also noticed that the Yu today was different from the one yesterday. Indifferent just like before. However, didn't Yu already tell her yesterday that they were good friends? So she could still talk to him. Was it because they were friends? Could it be because he wasn't feeling well? Thinking of this, Qinger asked with concern, "Are you feeling unwell? Why do you look so pale?" Gong Fan still did not answer. For a moment, Qinger felt a little uneasy. She didn't know why, but she felt that Yu had become like before. She couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Xiaoyichen, who was sitting in the back seat, looked at Gong Fan and then at Qinger. He quickly said to Qinger, "He's in a bad mood. Don't talk to him." He was being kind. When Qinger heard this, she nodded silently. However, she felt even more upset. Of course, she didn't know that Yu had dissociative identity disorder. However, she secretly wondered if she had done something wrong to make Yu unhappy. Xiaoyichen saw it all. After class, when Qinger wasn't around, he secretly tugged at the corner of Gong Fan's shirt. "Hey, do you feel that Qinger likes you?" Chapter 40-35. He wasn't stupid or slow to react. He just didn't care about such things. When Xiaoyichen heard this, he quickly pulled him to the side. "Although there are a lot of girls in this class who like you, Qinger has liked you for a long time since she became your desk mate in the 2nd grade. Gong Fan was still indifferent when he heard this. "So what? You don't have any feelings for her?" Xiaoyichen's face was full of gossip. However, Gong Fan was very unhappy with his question. "How old are you? What do you know about feelings? Do you understand?" Xiaoyichen shook his head numbly. "No girl likes me. Many girls like me. I'm puzzled. I'm so gentle to girls. Why don't any girls like me? Look at you. You're so reclusive and don't talk much. You look so cold and aloof, but there are so many girls who like you. Do girls nowadays like cool boys?" Gong Fan smiled and said slowly, "At least they like those with good grades." When Xiaoyichen heard this, he smiled awkwardly but politely. Are all children nowadays so snobbish? Comparing grades and family background? Gong Fan sneered. That's why I find it boring. He was still in primary school. But then again, even if he was in high school or university, he wouldn't date. It wasn't that he was cold and didn't like girls. It was because he didn't know when he would disappear. What right did a personality that would disappear at any time have to talk about these things? Just existing in this world had exhausted almost all of his mental and physical strength. Xiaoyichen touched the bridge of his nose. If you don't like her, it's better to make it clear. I feel that Qing'er treats you differently. Speaking of which, girls nowadays are so mature. It's really scary. Gong Fan turned to look at him and said angrily, if she doesn't tell me, how can I reject her? Xiaoyichen was stunned. That's true. He thought for a while and suddenly said, why don't we pass a note? As he spoke, he leaned over to Gong Fan's ear and whispered a few words. Before class started, Qing'er returned to her seat. Gong Fan glanced at her and secretly passed her a piece of paper. Qing'er was a little surprised. When she took the note in her hand, she saw that it was written by Gong Fan. However, the handwriting was slightly different from Yu Yu's. Different personalities even had different handwriting. She was a little surprised. She took a closer look and saw a line of words on the note. Do you like me? Her heart skipped a beat and she almost suffocated. She was stumped by such a straightforward question. Could it be that Yu Yu liked him? Thinking of this, she held the pen, but did not know how to reply. She raised her head again and stole a glance at Gong Fan, only to see him looking at the book. She did not know if he was reading seriously, but he seemed to be in a daze. Gong Fan's results were very good. Usually, even if he did not listen in class, as long as he was called by the teacher, no matter what the question was, he would be able to handle it with ease. In the past, when he was in class, he often slept. At first, the teacher was a little reluctant, so he called him to solve the problem. All the children were waiting to see him embarrass himself. However, they did not expect Gong Fan to walk to the blackboard and use the chalk to solve the question perfectly. Everyone was stunned. Chapter 40-36. There were really geniuses who just glanced at the textbook when school started and didn't need to listen to the class anymore. In addition, the elementary school questions were relatively simple and not difficult. Therefore, even if Xiaoyichen didn't listen in class, the teacher didn't care. Qing'er secretly wrote a line of words and handed it over when the teacher wasn't paying attention. Gong Fan took it and saw Qing'er's reply. Why do you ask? She seemed to be trembling with fear and a little shy. Qing'er was a little restless. She didn't know the meaning of Gong Fan's note. Could it be that Gong Fan liked her too? She liked Gong Fan. This was a secret that almost all the girls in the class knew. Therefore, Qing'er was very isolated. She wasn't isolated because she liked Gong Fan. There were so many girls who liked Gong Fan, so they wouldn't isolate Qing'er. It was just that Qing'er was Gong Fan's desk mate. This made many people jealous. Gong Fan was famous in the school. Many children in the classroom next door would secretly pass by the classroom and pretend to be unintentional to sneak a peek at Gong Fan. Sometimes, during the afternoon break, Gong Fan would rest on the table. Many children would just lie on the window and watch him for the entire afternoon break. Sometimes, the school would organize spring and autumn outings. They would line up according to their seats and the teacher would ask the deskmates to hold hands. Therefore, as Gong Fan's deskmate, Qing'er enjoyed privileges that many people yearned for but couldn't get. For example, she could sit in the same seat as Gong Fan on the bus. When queuing, she could hold Gong Fan's hand. During class, she would sit next to Gong Fan for almost the entire day. She could admire Gong Fan's beauty up close. It was not surprising that she was isolated. Another reason was that Qing'er was the daughter of the dean. Therefore, she also enjoyed many privileges. For example, every semester the seats would be rearranged. Only Qing'er's seat would always be next to Gong Fan. It was impossible for them to be deskmates for 3 years without special arrangements. Therefore, Qing'er was very isolated. In fact, this seating arrangement was not requested by Qing'er. It was specially arranged by Qing'er's mother, who was the dean. Gong Fan and Xiaoyichen's family background was unknown. The school kept it a secret. Even if it was a parent-teacher meeting, if Yun Shishir disguised herself, very few parents would be able to recognize her. However, the dean had the right to know. She knew Gong Fan's background, so she specially arranged for her daughter to sit next to him. It was naturally beneficial for the two children have a good relationship. As a result, Qing'er was able to get her wish, to sit next to Gong Fan after changing seats almost every semester. Gong Fan's height was constantly increasing, and his seat was slowly leaning towards the back. Qing'er's unshakable height was also sitting at the back with Gong Fan. Such an illogical arrangement naturally made many children's twos ants to their age. Titas SS, S2s to S. His personality was relatively straightforward. 3 words, I don't like you, left almost no face for her. Teet twos. Chapter 40-37. He didn't like her. He didn't like her. He said that he didn't like her. Then why did he ask her, do you like him or not? Qing'er couldn't figure it out, but the truth was right in front of her eyes. She couldn't deny it. You didn't like her. This fact almost destroyed her like the end of the world. Qing'er bit her lip hard and covered her face with her textbook. Her tears dripped onto the table. When little Li Chen, who was behind her, saw this, he stuck his head out to look, but he did not know what was written on the note. He was curious for a moment, and when he saw Qing'er crying so sadly, he became even more curious. She seemed to be crying very sadly. Gong Fan must have made her cry. This younger brother of his was really terrible. He always made girls cry. Why was he so fierce to girls? He couldn't help but wonder if Gong Fan had written something outrageous on the note. He was still the best. At least, he would never make Lisa cry or upset her. He was the only one who was beaten to tears by her. But then again, what exactly did Gong Fan write that made her so sad? Didn't she ask him to be more tactful? Xiao Chen stretched his neck, trying to see what was written on the note. Mui Chen. When the teacher called out his name, he was so shocked that he stood up, looking embarrassed. What? Ha ha ha. There was a burst of laughter. Many of them covered their mouths and secretly sized up Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen looked around speechlessly and saw others looking at him gloatingly. What are you laughing at? He furrowed his eyebrows and snorted. The teacher asked, what are you doing? I'm not doing anything. Then why are you stretching your neck? When Xiao Chen heard this, he pretended to be calm. Teacher, this is not an exam. I'm not peeping at other people's answers. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed again. The teacher was a little angry. Then can you explain the grammatical difference between the past tense and the present tense? Xiao Chen was dumbfounded. He didn't understand. He looked at the teacher. The teacher looked at him. They stared at each other. The scene fell silent for a moment. Gong Fan turned back to look at Mui Chen, then turned back silently. Gong Fan, answer this. Gong Fan did not even stand up. He said indifferently, don't ask me this kind of question. This time it was the teacher's turn to be embarrassed. He asked somewhat uneasily, what do you mean? Only an idiot wouldn't know such a simple question. The idiot behind him was so angry that his whole body trembled. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Have you ever seen a younger brother who would tear down his brother's stage? He was. This younger brother of his was too much. After class, Qing'er was still lying on the table. She buried her face in her arms and couldn't be seen clearly. But looking at her shoulders heaving up and down, one could guess that she must be crying. She was crying very hard. However, Gong Fan pretended not to see it and did not even say a word of comfort. If it had been Yu, he would have stepped forward and comforted her like a gentleman. When Xiao Chen saw this, he couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He gently moved closer to Gong Fan's ear and said uneasily, how long is she going to cry for? Gong Fan didn't say anything. Xiao Chen expected better from him. Can't you say a few words of comfort? What does it have to do with me? She's crying because of you. Does it have nothing to do with you? Chapter 40-38. Then why is she crying so hard? Gong Fan shook his head with an indifferent expression. Xiao Chen felt helpless too. Even though he sympathized with Qing'er, he didn't know how to comfort a crying girl. Just like that, Qing'er was in a daze for the entire day and had no energy left. That was how Gong Fan went about his business. However, something happened in the afternoon. Look, where's Qing'er's love letter? Let me see who it's for. During lunch break, A mischievous boy took a book from Chinger's desk and realized that Chinger had written a few pages of a love letter. Hence, he took advantage of the fact that Chinger wasn't in the classroom to announce it. The boy took a look and showed it to everyone, saying, "Wow, it's for you. Let me read it out loud for all of you." Hence, the boy read out the contents of the love letter to everyone with great emotion. You, do you know? I've liked you since the first time I saw you. Even though you don't like to talk and ignore me, it doesn't affect my love for you. At first, I was curious about you and didn't understand why you didn't pay attention in class. But no matter what the questions were, they couldn't stump you. I feel like you're Superman. The boy read out the love letter with great emotion. The others crowded around and fought over it from time to time, wanting to see Chinger's love letter with their own eyes. Just then, Chinger walked into the classroom with a stack of homework books. She had just returned from the teacher's office. As she was the class representative, she had to go to the teacher's office every afternoon to get her graded homework. She wasn't in a good mood. When she entered the classroom and saw many people crowding around the podium, she didn't pay much attention to it. It wasn't until she heard some familiar phrases when the homework books were distributed that she looked at the podium in surprise. She saw everyone sizing her up with smiles on their faces. Some of them looked at her with ridicule, some snickered, some looked at her with contempt, and some looked at her with disdain. Those piercing gazes seemed to be mocking her for thinking too highly of herself. The boy laughed and said, "Chinger, you're indeed the language class representative. Your writing style is so good." As he spoke, he proudly waved the love letter in his hand and playfully stuck out his tongue. Chinger shuddered, and her face flushed red with shame and indignation. "You stole my notebook." "Notebook? Is this a notebook?" This boy doesn't get along with Chinger very well. In the past, during self-study, Chinger was also a disciplinary committee member. She was a very serious girl and was very serious about rules. However, there were always some naughty children in the class who did not abide by the rules of self-study, including this boy. She had remembered his name more than once, so the boy had always mocked her for being a tattletale and went against her at every turn. Taking advantage of Chinger's absence, the boy secretly flipped through her desk. Unexpectedly, he found a love letter secretly written to Yu. So he spread the news. Chinger flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Li Sicheng, what are you doing? I didn't expect that as the class committee member and the language class representative. You didn't study hard and wanted to learn how to date like an adult. You even wanted to confess to Yu. Why don't you take a look at yourself? Yu is so outstanding. Would he like you?" Chapter 4039. Give it back to me. Chinger was so angry that her face was livid. She walked over and tried to snatch the notebook from his hand. "Give it back to me." "Huh. I'm not giving it back." Li Sicheng gripped the notebook tightly in his hand and snorted coldly at her. "Who told you to keep complaining and remembering my name? Now I've found out that you're in a relationship. You're a class committee member. Yet you're leading a student in a relationship. What would your mother, the head of teaching, think if word got out? You. Give it back to me." Chinger was so angry that she cried and screamed. Li Sicheng wanted to tease her. "I'm not giving it back. Why don't you come and snatch it from me?" Li Sicheng jumped onto the podium and held the notebook high. Chinger could not reach it no matter how hard she tried. She was not as tall as him to begin with. Now she could not snatch it from him. "Do you know you use family background? You're not even pretty enough. Why would anyone take a fancy to you? His father is the chairman of Shengyu Corporation and is worth hundreds of millions. His mother is the popular movie queen Yun Shishir. Are you worthy of him? What?" As soon as Li Sicheng finished speaking, the others exclaimed, "Yu's mother is a superstar?" If Li Sicheng had not said it, many people would not have known. "Yes, my dad said it. My dad once attended a cocktail party held by Shengyu Corporation and saw Yu standing with his parents. Many celebrities attended the party. I saw Huajin holding Yu. Wow, Huajin. I love Huajin so much. Is what you said true? If you don't believe me, come back and ask Yu." Li Sicheng was quite proud. It seemed that he was the only one in the class who knew about Yu's family background. A smug expression appeared on his face. Chinger was also a little stunned. She did not know about Yu's family background, so she was a little surprised when she heard it. Yu Yu's mother was the superstar Yun Shishir. Why hadn't Yu Yu mentioned this before? When Qing'er reacted, she immediately realized that now was not the time to think about this. She glared at Li Xiqing, suppressed her anger and said to him, "Come down quickly. It's dangerous to stand so high up. What if she fell? Also, this notebook contains my private information. You can't read it. Give the book back to me immediately. Otherwise, what will you do? Are you going to tell your dean's mother?" Li Xiqing snorted coldly. "What else can you do besides snitching? Also, you don't have to pretend to care about me. Why should I listen to you? Let me tell you, many people in the class don't like you as a class committee member. You're the only one who thinks too highly of yourself. You have no right to order me to do anything. At home, my parents have never ordered me to do anything. What right do you have to be so fierce to me?" Qing'er finally cried out of anger. She bit her lip hard and tears fell drop by drop, but she did not know what to do. She squatted on the floor sadly and covered her face as she cried bitterly. For a moment everyone was stunned. They didn't expect that things would turn out like this. Seeing Qing'er crying, they didn't know what to do for a moment. Yu Yu and Xiaoyichen had just entered the classroom when they saw this scene. Xiaoyichen saw Li Xiqing standing on the podium with a notebook in his hand. Qing'er was squatting by the side, crying sadly. He did not know what was going on. Chapter 40. Xiaoyichen frowned and asked, "What's going on?" It had to be said that Xiaoyichen and Yu Yu had WeChat accounts in class. Their WeChat accounts were even higher than those of any of the teachers. As soon as Xiaoyichen spoke, Li Xiqing immediately replied obediently, "Yu Yuichen, you came at the right time. Guess what I found?" Xiaoyichen glanced at him and said unhappily, "Get down from the podium." "Oh." Li Xiqing listened to Xiaoyichen's words and jumped down from the podium obediently. He went up to them and presented Qing'er's notebook in front of them as if he was presenting a treasure. "Can you guys guess what this is?" Gong Fan was not interested. Xiaoyichen looked at Qing'er, who was squatting and crying, and vaguely felt that Li Xiqing was the one who made her cry. What's going on? Why is Qing'er crying? At the side, a boy mustered up his courage and said. Li Xiqing peeked at Qing'er's notebook. "There's a love letter written by Qing'er to Yu Yu." Qing'er saw it and was so angry that she cried. Li Xiqing glared at them and said, "Do I need you to speak?" Gong Fan heard this and frowned. He looked at Qing'er with a complicated expression but did not say anything. However, he did not look too good. Li Xiqing saw that Gong Fan's expression was not good and guessed that he must be angry. However, he was confused. Why was he angry? Li Xiqing had to admit that he was very good at reading people's expressions. Therefore, he could tell that Gong Fan did not look good. He must be angry. However, he did not know why he was angry. However, he restrained himself a lot. Xiaoyichen said expressionlessly, "Stop fooling around. Return the notebook to Qing'er." Li Xiqing heard this, and even though he was unwilling, he did not dare to go against Xiaoyichen's wishes. Although Xiaoyichen usually looked carefree, he had a lot of prestige among the boys. Between boys, even if they didn't advocate martial arts, fighting was inevitable. However, ever since Xiaoyichen had started school, he had never lost a battle. Even when he fought with his seniors, he was a heaven-defying existence who could take on 10 people at once. Boys had a mindset of worshipping the strong. Therefore, Little Lichen's popularity and prestige among the boys were extremely high. Li Xiqing was even more shrewd. Although he was young, he knew that Xiaoyichen's family was much more powerful than his. Therefore, he knew that he could not afford to offend this child. At such a young age, he had learned to be snobbish from his father, who was a businessman. When Li Xiqing heard Xiaoyichen's words, he didn't continue to make things difficult for Qing'er. He reluctantly walked over and returned the notebook to Qing'er. However, Qing'er did not raise her head. Instead, she covered her face with her hands. She was so sad that she started to cry. After being fooled around by Li Xiqing, she had lost all her face. Children also valued face, especially girls. They were very thin-skinned. After Li Xiqing's nonsense, they could not raise their heads to face their classmates. Li Xiqing felt a little helpless. Qing'er ignored him, and Li Xiqing could not do anything about it. Hence, he turned to look at Xiaoyichen with an embarrassed expression. "What should I do?" She's ignoring me. What did you do? She's ignoring you. Xiaoqian said coldly. Did you bully her? Li Xiqing did not speak. As a boy, how could you bully a girl? That's too embarrassing. Xiaoqian especially disliked boys who bullied girls. Chapter 40-41. Li Xiqing couldn't help but feel a little guilty. He stammered. I didn't bully her. I just felt that it was a novelty, so you showed her the love letter. Xiaoqian's gaze turned even colder. Li Xiqing didn't say anything else and lowered his head guiltily. Gong Fan suddenly opened his hand and said, Give it to me. Li Xiqing was stunned for a moment. At first he didn't understand what he meant. It was only when he saw his open palm that he understood that Gong Fan was asking for the notebook. Hence, he obediently handed the notebook over to him. Gong Fan put the notebook back on the table and walked to Qing'er's side. He leaned over slightly and held her arm. Get up, he said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for her to hear clearly. However, Qing'er didn't want to get up and face him. Originally, writing a love letter was a more private matter. Now that it was publicized, it was extremely embarrassing. Now that the fact that she liked you was an open secret in class, she couldn't face her classmates anymore. Gong Fan saw that she was burying her head in the notebook. He frowned slightly and sighed. Liking someone isn't something to be embarrassed about. The moment he finished speaking, the people around him were stunned and a little surprised. Everyone knew that Gong Fan was speaking up for Qing'er when he said that. When Qing'er heard this, she was a little surprised. She finally lifted her head and looked at him pitifully with a pair of tear-stained eyes. She didn't know what to do. She didn't want this matter to trouble Yu because of her. She felt that it was all because of her that Yu was implicated. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a problem. It's going to be lunch break soon. Don't squat here. It was rare for Gong Fan's voice to be gentler. Go back to your seat. Okay. Qing'er stood up obediently and allowed him to help her back to her seat. At the side, a few girls who were enjoying the show couldn't help but feel a little disappointed when they saw this. They had wanted to watch the show and enjoy Qing'er's embarrassment. Now that Yu had stepped forward to defend her, they didn't feel good about it. He felt that Qing'er had profited from her misfortune. She had received special care from Yu. Their eyes were red with envy and jealousy. Qing'er returned to her seat and continued to lie down, not daring to raise her head. Gong Fan raised his head and said expressionlessly, No one is allowed to mention this matter in the future. Everyone present just pretend that this matter never happened. Do you understand? Got it? Yes. We will definitely keep it a secret. Everyone must keep this a secret for Qing'er. Everyone pretended to defend Qing'er and nodded their heads. Gong Fan returned to his seat and lay on the table for an afternoon nap. During the afternoon break, Xiaoqian called Li Xiqing over. Before class started, Li Xiqing followed behind Xiaoqian and came back dejectedly. He walked over to Qing'er's desk, lowered his head in guilt, and said without rhyme or reason, Qing'er, I'm sorry. Qing'er looked at him suspiciously. Just now Qian lectured me harshly. I feel that the incident at noon. He lowered his voice so that only he and Qing'er could hear him. I went overboard with the incident at noon. I apologize to you. Qing'er was a little surprised. What? Chapter 40-42. What happened at noon? I went too far. I apologize to you. Qing'er was surprised. What? Li Xiqing, who had always been proud and arrogant, was actually apologizing to her. It was unbelievable. Seeing that Qing'er was stunned, Li Xiqing was also embarrassed. He turned his face away awkwardly and said uneasily, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have joked about such things. I've thought about it seriously. Indeed, there's nothing wrong with liking someone. I made a mountain out of a molehill. Qing'er was completely taken aback. She originally thought that she had heard wrongly. She didn't expect Li Xiqing to apologize again in such a serious manner. This time Qing'er felt a little embarrassed. She didn't know why, but whenever Xiaoqian and Yu said something, everyone in the class treated it like an imperial edict. They had said that the incident in the afternoon was not allowed to spread, so it really didn't spread. In fact, everyone who was present seemed to have tacitly agreed that the incident had never happened. Qing'er pursed her lips and muttered, Actually, it's nothing. I was very angry at that time. Now that you've apologized, I'm not angry anymore. Li Xiqing's eyes lit up when he heard this. Does this mean that you're willing to forgive me? Yes, as long as you don't joke about such things in the future and don't do such dangerous things. Everything will be fine. After a pause, she emphasized. Oh yes, just pretend that you don't know that I like you. Li Xiqing was surprised when he heard this. At the same time, he felt a little regretful. Did you take "you're not good enough for you" seriously? That's not what I meant. Actually, you don't have to think too much. There's nothing wrong with liking someone. Yes, but you can't use this as an excuse to make liking someone a problem. Qing'er sniffled and rubbed her red and swollen eyes. She put on a natural and graceful smile and said, I admit that I like him. But I feel that my liking him will definitely become a problem for him. So I've always kept it in my heart. I didn't expect everyone to know about it. Li Xiqing felt even more guilty when he heard this and lowered his head. Ever since the children in the class found out that Yu's mother was Yun Shishir, they were in an uproar. There were often children who ran excitedly to his and Xiaoyiqin's desks, rubbing their hands and begging. Please, does your mommy know the FX youth group? I really like these 4 little brothers. Can you help me get their autographs? It doesn't matter if we don't have 4 people. I really like Huajin. I feel that he is very handsome. It would be great if my husband is Huajin in the future. I want to take a photo with Huajin. Can you help me beg your mommy? If I can have a photo with Huajin, I think I can brag about it for a year. Please, please. At night before dinner, Xiaoyiqin leaned against the bar counter thoughtfully and watched as Yun Shishir busied herself. After frowning for a long time, he finally spoke. Mommy. Yes. Yun Shishir finally looked up and glanced at him. She raised her eyebrows and asked, What's the matter? Is Uncle Huajin very popular now? Yes, very popular. Why? Chapter 40-43. Yun Shishir stared at the oven as she said, Uncle Huajin's career is at its peak now. Although his popularity could not be compared to when Gu Xingze was at his peak, it was not far off. No wonder. So many of his classmates were asking him for autographs and photos. Uncle Huajin is really popular these days. Yun Shishir thought for a moment and said, Maybe it has something to do with the drama that he's been filming recently. The drama that he filmed last year is called Stargazing. Isn't it one of the top shows in the ratings? I heard that he's been running around so much these past few days. As she said this, Yun Shishir was suddenly curious. Xiaoyiqin usually did not have the time or energy to care about Huajin. Why was he suddenly asking about Huajin? Many of my classmates are asking me for autographs. Yun Shishir was a little surprised when she heard this. Why are they asking you for autographs? That's because one of my classmates seems to know that my dearest mommy is a superstar. Perhaps it was an accident, but he spread the news to the rest of the class. Now everyone knows that you're my mommy, and I know Uncle Huajin. Yun Shishir's lips twitched when she heard this. Was Huajin really that popular? He was so popular that he was a primary school student. There are a total of 40 students in the class. Now almost half of them are asking me for autographs. Should I give them to them? Yun Shishir thought for a moment and pursed her lips. If it's just an autograph, then it's not a big problem. She felt that being a celebrity was just an ordinary profession. Perhaps it was because of the popularity of the audience that made it so special. Huajin was indeed very popular. Almost everyone in the industry concluded that Huajin's role as an idol had already been set. Everyone agreed that he probably could only play roles in ancient costumes and could not act in modern idol dramas. However, this year, Huajin completely overturned everyone's understanding of him with 2 teen idol dramas. One Blossoming Half-Summer, and the other, Starry Day. Huajin was already in his 20s. Even though he was wearing a school uniform, he didn't feel awkward at all. Especially since Blossoming Half-Summer was an idol drama that spanned from the campus to the city's shopping mall. The male lead was played by Huajin from his youth to his middle age. There wasn't any sense of awkwardness. It was hard to believe that the #1 actor in costume dramas was actually more popular than costume dramas. A total of 25 autographed photos. Xiaoyiqin counted with his fingers and then said to Yun Shishir, Mommy, ask Uncle Huajin for me. You can call him yourself. It's not like my classmate asked me for it, Yun Shirshir said. Xiaoqian opened his mouth and wanted to refute, but he didn't know what to say. All right. He gave in. Sitting in the study room, Xiaoqian dialed Hua Jin's number. After a long time, the call finally got through. Hello. Uncle Huajin, it's me. Ahem. Xiaoqian cleared his throat awkwardly. His face was a little red. Huajin was a little surprised when he heard Xiaoqian's voice. Eh? Why did you think of calling me? Can I ask you for a favor? What is it? Can you give me 25 autograph photos? Huajin was stunned when he heard this. Chapter 40-44. Because when my classmates found out that I knew you, they all asked me to do it. They said that they are your fans. I see. Huajin pondered for a moment. It's easy to get an autograph, but I won't be free for the next few days. Why don't you wait for me to take a break in a few days and I'll give you an autograph? Okay, that's good too. Xiaoqian was touched. Thank you, Uncle Huajin. Huajin was touched. Xiaoqian and Huajin were not close. In fact, Huajin liked Xiaoqian and Yu a lot. However, these two rascals were not close to anyone other than Yun Shirshir. He had been worried that he could not find a chance to suck up to them. Wasn't this a good time to suck up to them? He did not expect that Xiaoqian would say thank you to him in such a sweet voice. Huajin suddenly realized that his chance to suck up to them had finally come. Unfortunately, his schedule was quite full these few days. Hence, Huajin promised Xiaoqian that he would send over the autograph as soon as he was on break. Xiaoqian was not in a hurry. However, Xiaoqian's classmates thought that Xiaoqian had forgotten about the autograph after so many days. Hence, they urged him a few times. Xiaoqian explained to them that Huajin's schedule was too full. He would send over the autograph in a few days when he was free. Hence, they waited patiently for a while. However, after waiting for a long time, some of them started to complain. Is it real or not? Didn't Li Xiqing say that Xiaoqian's mother is a celebrity? Why does it seem so difficult to get an autograph? Could it be that the autograph is fake? After all, it's weird for him to agree to more than 20 autograph photos at once. Actually, it's normal for celebrities to not know each other. Perhaps Xiaoqian's mother doesn't have a good relationship with Huajin? Wasn't Xiaoqian's mother Yun Shirshir? I know her. She and Huajin acted in a TV series called Lethal Beauty. Have you seen it? Xiaoqian's mother played a bad woman in the drama. I hated her to death when I was watching the drama. I couldn't wait for her to die. Shoo! You can't let Xiaoqian hear that. I'm talking about the characters in the TV series. It's not like it's him. Even so, we can't let Xiaoqian hear about it. He'll get angry. Yeah, it seems like he's always very serious about his family. He won't even joke about it. After waiting for a few more days, Huajin went on leave just as most of them were about to forget about it. He had been planning how to give Xiaoqian and Yu a surprise. In the end, Xiaoqian and Yu were completely shocked. That afternoon, during a self-study session, someone suddenly screamed, "It's Huajin!" Wow! It's really Huajin. Soon the entire classroom was in an uproar. Xiaoqian, who was already dozing off, was suddenly awakened by an earth-shattering scream. What the hell? Was it an earthquake? Chapter 40-45. There was a crowd of children in the classroom. Huajin was looking for Xiaoqian and Yu through the window. When he finally found them, he smiled and waved at them. Gongfan turned around with a cold expression and pretended not to see them. Xiaoqian, on the other hand, was shocked. It was Huajin. When he was dozing off just now, he suddenly felt as though there was an earthquake in the classroom. There was a huge commotion and he vaguely heard Huajin being at home. He wondered what was going on, but it turned out that Huajin was actually here. He came directly to the school in person. Was he crazy? Xiaoqian had a look of disbelief on his face. Rather than saying that he was shocked, it was more appropriate to say that he was horrified. Was he crazy? Huajin, on the other hand, did not seem to be aware of his horror. Instead, he waved the autographed photos in his hand as though they were treasures. He smiled at Xiaoqian through the window and said, "I brought the autographed photos over." Xiaoqian held his forehead helplessly. He actually came all the way to the school just to give a few autographed photos. This was simply too crazy. Xiaoqian stood up helplessly and walked out of the classroom. Huajin immediately came up to him and handed him a thick stack of autographed photos. The reason why he said it was a thick stack was because Huajin did not give him photos, but handwritten photos. Autographed. Said, "Where are the photos that you promised?" Huajin said proudly, "These are all limited edition photo albums. You can't buy them normally. I hoarded them and prepared them as gifts for my fans. I've offered them to you. Are you still not satisfied?" He talked non-stop. After a pause, Huajin lowered his voice and said angrily, "Besides, how shameful would it be to give them photos? Wouldn't they secretly say that you're petty?" Xiaoqian rolled his eyes. "It's already troublesome to help them. Why do they have to ask for this and that? Isn't it fine if it's just a signed photo?" Huajin shook his head and sighed. "Since they're all my little fans, then I'll just treat it as me giving my fans some benefits." Xiaoqian raised his eyebrows. "All right. By the way, how did you get in here? No one stopped you?" As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something. "Also, you raided my school. What are you trying to do?" "I have a surprise for you." "Haha, there's no joy." Xiaoqian glanced at him. "Our school is heavily guarded and outsiders are not allowed to enter. How did you get in?" When Huajin heard this, he was a little surprised. "Is that so? Actually, I didn't want to come in. I wanted to call you at the school gate and ask my assistant to bring it in. In the end, when I reached the entrance, the security guard recognized me. Then, the principal who was on duty at the school gate welcomed me in." As he spoke, Huajin pointed behind him. Xiaoqian looked in the direction he was pointing at. He saw the purchasing teacher, a few deans from the education department, the vice principal, and the security guard standing behind Huajin excitedly. They were all smiling politely. Where was the moral integrity that was promised? Was the disciplinary teacher who was staring at Huajin with a smitten smile really the strict teacher who always preached that nothing can be accomplished without rules? Little Chen swallowed his saliva. When Huajin saw that Little Chen was staring at a teacher, he immediately said, "This teacher seems to be a fan of mine too. Unfortunately, I only brought so many autographed photo albums with me. I couldn't give her a set, so she asked me for a group photo." Chapter 40-46. Xiaoqian looked as if she had seen a ghost. "She's your fan?" It was hard to imagine. The strict discipline teacher in her impression was actually Huajin's fan. Recently, Huajin's dramas had become very popular. Therefore, many people had become Huajin's fans. "Huajin, are you here to pick up Xiaoqian from school?" the discipline teacher asked cautiously. Huajin nodded. "Yes, school should be over soon. I'm waiting to pick up the two of them and go home together." The discipline teacher hummed in acknowledgement and looked at Little Chen enviously. She envied Xiaoqian for being able to interact so intimately with Huajin. She even had her idol personally pick her up from school. She wished she could become Xiaoqian. Even if it was just for a moment, she would be happy. Gong Fan sat in the classroom and yawned. He leaned on the table and ignored what was happening outside the window. It was as if Huajin's appearance had nothing to do with him. The children in the classroom were in an uproar. They all got up and ran to the window and door. When the discipline teacher saw this, she immediately stormed into the classroom and said sternly, "Focus on your self-study. Don't look around." "Wow, that's too much. We're acting like a die-hard fan in front of Huajin. What's wrong with us looking around?" Many students lowered their voices and muttered unhappily. After the discipline teacher left, a group of people looked out of the window curiously. Many of the children were amazed by Huajin's good looks. "Wow, I didn't expect him to be better looking in real life than on TV. Don't many people say that celebrities don't look as good in real life as they do on TV? I think Huajin looks really handsome in real life. He's really handsome." Huajin was much more handsome in real life than on TV. Although Huajin didn't want to admit this, he really didn't look good on camera. In fact, his face looked chubbier in TV. In real life, Huajin's beauty was undeniable. Celebrities and ordinary people were really different. Huajin stood outside the corridor. Although he was only wearing ordinary clothes and a cap, it could not hide his shining physique. Not long after, Huajin and the class teacher walked in. Then, according to the name list that Xiaoqian had given them, They handed out autographs and photos to the children. The classroom was in an uproar. Round after round of exclamations rose and fell. After school, Hua Jin waited at the classroom door for Xiaoyichen and Yu to pack their bags. He told his assistant to wait outside the school gate. But the assistant was worried that a public figure like him standing in the corridor would cause a commotion and congestion when parents came to the classroom to wait for their children to finish school. Hua Jin, on the other hand, felt that with such a large group of people surrounding him, it would only attract more attention. So, Hua Jin sent his bodyguard and assistant away and waited outside the door alone. Not long after, the parents who came to pick their children up from school also arrived. Just as the assistant was worried, Hua Jin was indeed dressed casually, but it couldn't hide his shining aura at all. However, many people were only suspicious and didn't take it to heart. Still, some people recognized him. Is that Li Ziyu? That's impossible. Why would Li Ziyu come here? Chapter 40-47. That's true. He's a superstar. Why would he come to a primary school? Everyone heard this. That's true. Hence they didn't take it to heart. Hua Jin stood quietly among the group of parents until Xiaoyichen and Yu walked out of the classroom with Hua Jin. The other children walked out and told their parents in surprise that the person who had been waiting at the classroom entrance was Hua Jin. All the parents were shocked. So it really was Hua Jin. However, a few teachers immediately rushed over and instructed the parents not to spread the news of Hua Jin entering and exiting the school. Otherwise, if the media were to find out about it, they would definitely fabricate reports about it and spread rumors about it. The three of them arrived at the school gate one after another. However, they suddenly saw a raptor parked at the school gate. It was such a big car that it was almost the most eye-catching car at the school gate. Hua Jin glanced over and saw Gong Jie leaning against the raptor. He was so shocked that his eyes widened. Gong Jie. D***. Why was he here? Xiaoyichen was surprised to see Gong Jie. However, he immediately remembered and said, "Oh, I remember now. Uncle said that he would pick us up from school today." Hua Jin frowned and asked, Didn't the chauffeur pick you up? Something happened at the chauffeur's house today. I heard that his wife had an accident and was hospitalized. He had to take care of her at the hospital. Because it happened so suddenly, he asked Uncle to pick us up. When Hua Jin heard this, he broke out in a cold sweat and immediately said, "Let's pretend that we didn't see him. Let's go." Xiaoyichen's lips twitched when he heard this. He was a little embarrassed and said, "Is that really okay? If Uncle didn't see us, he would be very angry." Gong Fan raised his eyebrows but didn't say anything. Xiaoyichen was a little worried. Uncle can be very scary when he gets angry. Hua Jin was speechless. He pondered for a moment and then said quietly, "How about this? I'll leave first. You can follow him home, okay?" Xiaoyichen was about to nod when he stared blankly behind him with a horrified expression. Hua Jin saw his horrified expression and didn't react at first. He turned around abruptly and almost bumped into Gong Jie's chest. Hua Jin was speechless. He slowly raised his head and saw Gong Jie looking at him condescendingly with a cold smile on his face. Hua Jin was not short. At 1.8 meters he was considered very tall, but Gong Jie was 8 to 9 centimeters taller than him. Don't underestimate this height. It was enough for Hua Jin to look up to him. Damn it, did he have to be so tall? When Hua Jin saw him, he greeted him awkwardly. What a coincidence. Ha. He laughed awkwardly and rubbed his hands. He was obviously very guilty. His lips curled into a lukewarm smile as he retorted, "Who's the one who wants to leave quietly? Why? Did you see a ghost?" Hua Jin shook his head in horror. No. The corners of Gong Jie's lips curled upward, and the fear in Hua Jin's eyes intensified. Why did he have to stare at him with such a terrifying expression? "Well, I have something to do. I'll leave first." Hua Jin shrunk his neck and was about to escape when Gong Jie raised his hand and grabbed him by the back of his collar. Chapter 40-48. Gong Jie sat in the driver's seat and adjusted the rearview mirror. Hua Jin's pale face was reflected in the mirror. He didn't know why, but he felt as though he had been scared silly and was dumbstruck. Looking at his soulless and empty eyes, Gong Jie suddenly felt like laughing, but he held it back and snorted nonchalantly. Hua Jin shivered again. Gong Jie gave him a meaningful glance and put on his seatbelt as though nothing had happened. Gong Fan sat in the front passenger seat. When he got into the car, he crossed his arms and looked calm. Hua Jin felt as though he was in an icehouse filled with despair. Who's going to save him? Hua Jin gulped and asked carefully. Where are we going? Gong Jie asked him back expressionlessly. Where do you want to go? Hua Jin said weakly. Actually, I have something to do tonight. Walking around? Why are you so afraid of me? I'm not going to eat you up. Hua Jin frowned, but he sighed in his heart. How infuriating. He also felt that it was very strange. He didn't know why, but Gong Jie had left a very deep and terrifying impression on him. He felt that he was a super dangerous person. However, Hua Jin also knew that no matter how much Gong Jie disliked him, he wouldn't do anything to him. He wouldn't kill him or eat him up, but his fear of Gong Jie was instinctive. Instinctive fear. Gong Jie said coldly, I'm not going to eat you up. You don't have to be so afraid of me. He sized up Hua Jin through the rearview mirror, and Hua Jin could also size up Gong Jie through the rearview mirror. Gong Jie didn't know why, but even though he was smiling, he felt as though a layer of ice had formed on his face. He realized that Gong Jie and Gong Fan were indeed uncle and nephew. Regardless of whether he was happy or unhappy, he always acted like he was unapproachable to outsiders. But, even when he was angry, he still looked gentle in front of Yun Shirshir. He couldn't be more envious. In this world, perhaps only Yun Shirshir could enjoy such a privilege. Originally, the atmosphere between Hua Jin and Xiaoyichen was very harmonious. However, ever since they got into Gong Jie's car, both of them were as quiet as chickens. Although Xiaoyichen and the Gong Jie seemed to be getting along well, in reality, Xiaoyichen was also relatively quiet in front of the Gong Jie. He did not dare to speak carelessly, because Gong Jie would scold him. Gong Jie's mouth was also very vicious. He was almost on par with Yu, and he hit the nail on the head. He still remembered that Xiaoyichen had drawn a picture, and showed it to Yun Shirshir as though he was presenting a treasure. Gong Jie happened to be beside them, and he quietly said, Is this a scribble? Xiaoyichen's entire being withered. How could they bully him like this? Moreover, the uncle and nephew were ganging up to bully him. Gong Jie even said that Xiaoyichen's genes must have mutated. Otherwise, how could you be so stupid when Xiaoyichen was so smart? However, fortunately, Muyaja was on Xiaoyichen's side. He casually said, Why don't you say that Yu's genes have mutated? His IQ is already considered heaven-defying for a child his age. Although this sentence didn't carry much weight, but at least he had his daddy's support. It could be said that the family was divided into two factions. Muyaja and Xiaoyichen, Hua Jin, Yu and Gong Jie. Yun Shirshir was in the middle. At that moment they happened to pass by the intersection of the street. Chapter 40-49. Gong Jie immediately stopped the car and instructed Xiaoyichen. Sit here obediently. Uncle will buy it for you. After a pause, he glanced at Gong Fan. Do you want some? Gong Fan's face was full of disdain. No. Then what do you want to drink? Wolfberry tea. Gong Jie mocked. Are you a Buddhist primary school student? You're so young and you're already so concerned about your health. I don't like things that are too sweet. Hua Jin muttered curiously. That can't be. Doesn't Yu like sweet things? In the past, Yu especially liked to drink cola. Other than cola, she also loved other sweets. However, Gong Fan was different. He only drank cola and politely declined other sweets. Gong Jie looked at Hua Jin again. What about you? Are you treating me to a drink? Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and was a little displeased. What else? You? No. There are too many people. Gong Jie didn't say anything and only instructed him to take care of the two children. The car door closed with a bang, leaving Hua Jin and Xiaoyichen looking at each other. Gong Fan said, Why does it feel like a husband asking his wife to take care of the children? When Hua Jin heard this, his face turned red with anger. Hey, don't spout nonsense. Gong Fan said, I'm just spouting nonsense. Why are you so agitated? Hua Jin was speechless. When Xiaoyichen heard this, he held back his laughter the entire time. His shoulders shook as he secretly laughed. After hearing what Gong Fan said, he also realized that it was true. From the looks of it, his uncle was really like a husband who went out to work, and Hua Jin was like a stay-at-home wife who stayed at home to take care of the children. When he thought about it, it really did look like it. Xiao Chen covered his mouth and snickered. Hua Jin complained. What are you laughing at? Now that he says it like that, it's quite vivid. Little Li Chen put on a serious face. Seriously speaking, have you considered my uncle's offer? He's so handsome and rich. If you follow him, you can be at ease and be the Gong madam. Hua Jin looked at him with disdain. Are you trying to sell me out? I'm betraying my uncle. Speak of the devil. When Gong Jie returned with the milk tea and opened the car door, Xiao Chen was stunned. Uncle, how are you so fast? This was the entrance of the bustling city, a street full of delicacies. Usually at this time there would be a long queue in front of the milk tea shop. It had only been a few minutes and he had already bought it back. Gong Jie frowned. Is that so? I said I was in a hurry and the group moved aside. Xiao Chen couldn't help but feel suspicious. Did you threaten them? No. Gong Fan said coldly. Even if he didn't threaten them, just a glance was enough to scare them out of their wits. Gong Jie passed the goji berry tea to Yu and the pudding milk tea to Xiao Chen. When Hua Jin took the remaining cup, he was surprised to find that it was his favorite matcha flavor. He didn't tell Gong Jie that he liked the matcha flavor. Instead, he said it was up to him. Gong Jie also bought it casually. What's wrong? You don't like this flavor? Hua Jin was stunned and immediately replied. No, I like this flavor. Did you buy it casually? Gong Jie was taken aback as well, and his brows furrowed slightly. At the side, Gong Fan interrupted. Uncle also loves matcha flavor the most. Hua Jin was surprised. You like the matcha flavor too? Yes. Chapter 40-50. Hugging the matcha milk cap, Hua Jin sucked a mouthful of the milk through the straw, feeling completely satisfied. Gong Fan took a sip of wolfberry tea and frowned. He put it aside and stopped drinking. Gong Jie was surprised to see this. What's wrong? There seems to be a lot of saccharin. After a pause, Gong Fan said, It's too sweet. Gong Jie was surprised when he heard this. His gaze became more complicated. I recently took over a patient with multiple personality disorder. Gong Jie sat on the sofa while Alice sat opposite him. She poured tea for him and said calmly, This patient has a total of 6 personalities and each of them is independent. Have you started to study this field? If it weren't for your dear nephew, I wouldn't have taken over this patient. Alice sat down and let out a heavy sigh. In the world, there aren't many patients with multiple personality disorder. The proportion of people with dual personality disorder is also very small. However, most of the more complicated conditions are handled by authoritative research institutions. In short, they are test subjects. These patients have been tortured by multiple personality disorder for a long time and have been controlled. Generally, the root cause of multiple personality disorder is because of self-identity disorder. They lose their sense of self-unity and split into 2 or more different personalities. When one personality appears, the other personalities will automatically withdraw. Generally speaking, the main personality has the advantage. As far as I know, the one with the most classifications in the world is Billy Milliken. Billy? Yes, his story was even filmed into a movie. Back then, he committed the crime of rape in Ohio State University. However, he was diagnosed with a rare case of multiple personality disorder because he was acquitted. Gong Jie nodded. I've heard of this person. This person was the only felon in the history of Country M who was exempted from punishment because of multiple personality disorder. After he committed the crime and was arrested, he didn't know what kind of crime he had committed. He underwent a psychological evaluation and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Alice took a sip of tea and continued. After he was exempted from punishment, he began to undergo a long period of treatment. 2 doctors discovered that he had a total of 24 personalities. However, through treatment, the doctor found that these personality splits are inseparable from his childhood. What do you mean? Billy's mother, Dorothy, grew up on a farm in Ohio. When she grew up, she lived with her husband, Dick. After they divorced, Dorothy moved to Miami and became a singer. There, She lived with a married comedian named Morrison. Dorothy and Morrison had 3 children. Their second son, William, was Billy. After that, a few years later, Morrison died of suicide. Previously, because of gambling debts and alcoholism, he had also committed suicide. After that, Dorothy left Miami with the child and returned to Ohio. Dorothy met Carmo. This man, Carmo, is the key to Billy's schizophrenia. Chapter 40:51. Carmo had 2 daughters, one of whom was the same age as Billy. After Dorothy and Carmo got married, Carmo abused Billy for a long time, including raping him. Before that, because of his father's suicide and his mother's multiple remarriages, Billy already had multiple dissociative personalities. His first split personality was a little girl, Christine, when she was 3 years old. Alice had carefully studied Billy's 24 personalities. Among them, the core personality was Billy. He was 26 years old and had brown hair. The second personality, Arthur, was 22 years old and was British. He was rational and cold. He studied physics, chemistry, and medicine by himself. He could even speak Arabic fluently. He was stubborn and conservative and thought of himself as a capitalist. He was the first person to discover the existence of the other personalities. He was in charge of management and decided who would appear to represent the family. He wore glasses. He could speak Arabic? Yes. Gong Jia was baffled by her words. How could different personalities even have different nationalities? Humans were really mysterious creatures. Gong Jia did not know that there were multiple personalities in the past. So far, many strange incidents have been discovered. Some people, who were originally masochistic when they woke up, started to speak authentic Spanish for no reason. After diagnosis, they were also split personalities. Gong Jia finally understood what was going on. In other words, these personalities are all independent entities. The world where personalities exist is unimaginable to us ordinary people. The information we have is also from the oral accounts of the patients. For example, Billy had a split personality when he was 3 years old. When he was 3 years old, he was often called to a corner by the teacher to develop. She was an English little girl. She was smart but suffered from dyslexia. She liked to draw flowers and butterflies. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. These personalities were also oral accounts of the patients. Alice said, "This is the most special thing about Billy. The 24 personalities all liked to draw. These portraits were all drawn by Billy." Gong Jia still felt that it was a little unbelievable. Among so many personalities, there was a personality called Philip. He was 20 years old and had a rough personality. He was from New York and had a strong Brooklyn accent. There was also a personality called Kevin. He was 20 years old and good at scheming. He once planned the robbery of Gray's pharmacy. He liked to write and had blonde hair. In other words, Gong Jia concluded, these 24 personalities were all different. Some were little girls, some were rough men, and some were gentle writers. The 24 personalities each had their own roles and played different roles. However, the outside world could not tell. Only Billy himself knew. Yes. Will there be hallucinations? Alice stared into his eyes carefully and said slowly, "How scary is it when dual personalities and multiple personalities act up? Let's make an analogy and hypothesis. When you are driving, you suddenly realize that you can't remember what happened on the way, or part of it. When you listen to someone talk, you suddenly realize that you can't hear a part or all of what he said. Persistent, severe headache, especially after the above 2 conditions appear. I found myself somewhere, but I don't know how I got here." Chapter 40:52. Persistent, severe headaches, especially after the above 2 conditions appear. You realize that you are somewhere, but you don't know how you got here. You realize that you are wearing unfamiliar clothes, but you don't know how you put them on. Sometimes you feel that the people, objects, or the world around you are not real. You feel as if you are standing next to yourself and watching yourself do something. Or you are watching yourself as if you are observing another person. You face the mirror, but you realize that the person in the mirror is not looking at you, or you don't know yourself. You feel that you are in a familiar place, but you realize that you are very unfamiliar or unfamiliar with it. You are so focused on a fantasy or daydream that you feel as if it is really happening to you. When you are alone, you talk to yourself loudly. You realize that you can't remember if you have done something before. Sometimes you realize that you are observing the world through a layer of fog. People and objects are very far away from you, and you can't see them clearly. Alice rattled off one item after another. Every one of them was enough to make Gong Jia tremble in fear. Multiple personality disorder was such a terrifying world. Gong Jia's expression could not help but become a little solemn. Is it very difficult to treat? It's very difficult, but it's not impossible. Alice continued. More than 10 years ago, there was a patient with multiple personality disorder in Lima. This patient had a total of 10 personalities, and 3 of them were very brutal and very disobedient. Therefore, the hospital prepared a very cruel electric shock treatment for this disobedient patient. Electric shock. Gong Jia was shocked when he heard that. Isn't that? It's very painful. Alice faced him. In Lima, Billy also received such painful treatment. After the electric shock, Billy was locked up in the most heavily guarded Ward 9. Most of the personalities gave up hope of living and focused on entering the land of death. The land of death. Yes, once they enter the land of death, these personalities will be cruelly killed, which means that they will sleep forever. However, it is not ruled out that they will wake up again. However, among the 24 personalities, a teacher appeared and took over the body. He was the sum of the 23 personalities, and he had the memories and abilities of all of them. He was unwilling to bow his head to Lima and refused to admit defeat with his death. He wanted to resist and announce Lima's tyranny to the world. He wanted to completely destroy this hell. After that, this personality used his brilliant acting skills and communication skills to convince Lima that he had become obedient enough. Hence, he was transferred from the strictest room, Room 9, to the most relaxed room, Room 6. Among them, one of the personas wanted to kill the doctor who took over him, but he was stopped by the teacher. This persona of the teacher was the cleverest of the personas. He started to collect evidence of the hospital's illegal activities. Without a pen and paper, he pulled out a cotton ball from inside his blanket. He wet it and started to write under the bed. He stole his wardmate's tape recorder and stuck it into the toilet vent to record the contents of the medical team's meeting. With the evidence of overdose, he threatened to give him a pen, paper, and visitation rights immediately. This personality is really smart. Yes. Chapter 4053. When Gong Jia heard this, he seemed to be deep in thought. Alice changed the topic. I don't have many chances to come into contact with patients like Billy. After all, there are so many patients with multiple personalities. It's really rare. But recently, I got an opportunity to take over a patient. What kind of patient is she? An 18-year-old girl named Lucy. Lucy? She's an Englishwoman who grew up in New York. I've been treating her for 2 months. Then, I found out that her split personality is also related to her childhood. When Gong Jia heard this, he kept quiet and listened carefully to Alice's analysis. 3 years ago, she was sentenced to 80 years in prison because she killed 3 students. However, after the diagnosis, the lawyer overturned the conviction on the grounds that she was suffering from schizophrenia. But, the legal procedures are very strict. Now the lawyer is still defending her innocence. When Alice talked about Lucy, she seemed to be interested. Actually, putting aside her unfortunate experience, I feel that she's the strangest patient I've ever taken over. To me, taking over such a patient makes me want to find out more. What kind of patient is she? Alice came up with a rough draft in her mind and said tirelessly. When Lucy was young, her mother went through 2 marriages. After that, she married a man who was 3 years older than her. She married him with Lucy. From then on, for 10 years until she was 15 years old, this man had been abusing Lucy for a long period of time. He even sexually assaulted her. The crime she committed was that she murdered 3 seniors from the same school. After killing them one by one, she threw their bodies into the sea. When the case was in an endless loop, she suddenly turned herself in and said that she had murdered the 3 boys. However, when she turned herself in, she also accused the 3 boys of sexually assaulting her twin sister. However, after the police investigated and collected evidence, they found that her accusation was completely false. After checking her from all aspects and collecting evidence, There was no evidence to prove that the three boys had done anything to her twin sister. She had 2 cousins in total, and one of them said that such a thing had never happened. However, Lucy said that the 3 boys had violated her twin sister. But, in fact, she did not have a twin sister. Even so, she still insisted on what she said. Later, during the trial, her defense lawyer requested for a psychiatric evaluation. According to the procedure, after the evaluation, they found that she had multiple personalities. Chapter 4054. Later on, her childhood sweetheart, the detective, saw through this and persuaded her to turn herself in. But later on, she found out that these people did not exist at all. They were all her split personalities. These 3 boys did not do anything to her. However, not long after, a girl from the same school stood up and testified that she was the real victim of these 3 boys. At that time, Lucy was also at the scene. She probably saw this scene with her own eyes, and it triggered the unbearable memories of her youth, which evolved into the final situation. In other words, these were all her fantasies, and during the unbearable torture of her youth, she kept splitting up those personalities. That twin sister was just her unfortunate reflection. She wanted to get rid of the unbearable trauma of her youth, so she wanted to forget all the pain and torture. But the more she tried to forget, the more depressed she felt. So gradually, she split up a second personality to bear these painful memories. The more Alice said, the more uneasy Gong Jie felt. He had a feeling that Lucy's situation was inexplicably similar to Yu Yu's. When I hypnotized Yu Yu back then, I entered his memory and dug out a lot of painful memories from his memory. Presumably, Gong Fan's personality was Yu Yu's split personality to bear the pain and unbearable memories. Gong Jie muttered to himself in shock. Gong Fan was actually Yu Yu's split personality. Yes, so Yu Yu felt a lot of guilt towards Gong Fan, because this personality was created by him to bear the pain. So, Gong Jie followed his words and said, "So Yu Yu was unwilling to destroy him." "Yes, Yu Yu is very kind, really kind." After a pause, Alice continued, "So I've been thinking of a way." "Yes. I once thought of creating a society with a personality to maintain order. Would this solve the problem?" Gong Jie was a little worried when he heard this. "You mean you want to create a third personality or a fourth personality?" "Yes." "No." Gong Jie's attitude was firm. "If that's the case, a person's spirit won't be able to withstand it. Create more personalities to form a society of personalities?" "No, I won't agree." Alice's methods always frightened him. Indeed, this personality society was as shocking as the Sky Eye plan that Yu Yu had proposed. "Do you think I'd use Yu Yu as a test subject?" Alice laughed it off. "No, I won't. I'm going to treat that girl now. If there are no accidents, I'll manage her personality and create a personality society. If this treatment plan works, maybe I can consider it." Gong Jie neither nodded nor denied. He just remained silent. He also wanted to take a gamble. "That girl became your test subject?" "He's not a test subject." Alice shook her head and said, "Do you know why she's in my hands?" "Why?" "Because everyone is at their wits' end." Chapter 4055. Speaking of electroconvulsive therapy, Gong Jie was a little curious and asked tentatively, "What exactly is electroconvulsive therapy?" Alice furrowed her brows and continued, "Do you know why personalities exist?" "Why? Isn't it because the main personality created them?" Alice nodded and said, "Then do you know why it's so easy to create personalities but so difficult to eliminate them?" "I don't know. It's because there's almost no difference between the main personality and the secondary personality. Every personality can be seen as an independent entity. Then, since they're no different from ordinary people, and ordinary people don't want to die, why would a personality be willing to be destroyed so easily? Once they exist, once they're created, they'll be like ordinary people. They'll have 7 emotions and 6 desires, independent thoughts and selfishness, and even ambition. Then, gradually, these personalities will want to occupy the main personality. Therefore, it'll cause a lot of mental stress. Back then, Yu Yu's main personality collapsed because of the intense conflict between the 2 personalities. So, Gong Jie sorted out some ideas. That's why it'll cause a lot of mental stress. That's right. Gong Jie gradually understood. In the past, he didn't understand what it was like to have multiple personalities. But after listening to Alice's explanation, he gradually gained a deeper understanding. But do you know why some people choose to commit suicide? Are they normal people? Yes. Because of pain. Alice's tone suddenly became heavier. Because of the indelible pain, whether it's mental or physical, there really is such a pain that makes people want to die. Gong Jia suddenly understood. Electroconvulsive therapy is to let these personalities experience the pain of being born as a human, so they choose to destroy themselves? Yes, bingo. Alice snapped her fingers and her eyes revealed a look of amazement. You seem to have a lot of potential. I don't want to have such a cruel potential. Gong Jia understood. Using electroconvulsive therapy to let each personality experience the pain of being born as a human, then these personalities would start to get tired of the feeling of being a human body. Then they would choose to go to the land of death. However, the main personality will also suffer this terrible pain. Alice stared deeply into his eyes. Although this pain is also borne by the main personality, no matter how painful it is, it's not fatal. And you also know that the main personality will never die. The ones who die will only be the other personalities. Gong Jia suddenly felt a bone-chilling coldness.